Yeah, can I say that, Tim?
All right. All right, welcome everybody to the Wednesday, November 1st, 2023 meeting of the City of Falls Church Planning Commission. Mr. Trainer, would you like to get us started with the roll?
Yep. Ms. Friedlander?
Here.
Mr. Krasner?
I'm here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Puentes?
Here.
Ms. Comont?
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And the agenda is as it's printed. I'm not aware of any changes. Does anyone have any questions or comments about it? Seeing none, would someone like to move to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda for the Planning Commission meeting on the evening of Wednesday, November 1st, 2023.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. And now we have the pleasure of hearing from Hillary Orr from the City of Alexandria. Mr. Stoddard, would you like to do the honors of the introduction?
Sure. I'm happy to introduce the program as well as the speaker tonight, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. So this is one of the Planning Commission's Speaker Series events. I think as the members are aware, this has been a tradition or a program that the Planning Commission has been running for a number of years. But the idea is to take the best of what's going on in various city planning topics from folks who are doing it day in, day out in other jurisdictions or other areas, and to bring that knowledge into Falls Church. So it's not necessarily related to something that's on your agenda tonight, but it is a topic of interest throughout the city. Tonight's presentation is by Hillary Orr, who is the Deputy Director of Transportation for the City of Alexandria. Over the last 10-plus years, they've made great strides on delivering complete street designs, moving forward with a Vision Zero policy, and really developing a culture of safety. And so tonight, what we'll be doing is hearing a presentation on what Alexandria has done over that time and how they've gotten themselves into that position to really deliver these successful multimodal and safe transportation projects.
Very good. Ms. Orr, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me tonight. I really like this idea of a speaker series, and it might be something that we bring back to our Transportation Commission. Thanks, Paul, for inviting me. And like Paul mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director of Transportation for the city, and so our team oversees a lot of transportation elements. We do complete streets, pedestrian, bicycle, multimodal design, long-range planning, transit planning, where we currently have about $175 million to implement 2 BRT corridors. So those are big initiatives that we're working on. We also have a mobility services team that does parking and curbside management, and also things like capital bike share and scooters. So kind of everything transportation that you're seeing on the streets of Alexandria kind of comes from this team. And so I also just want to give you a little bit of background for me. So I've been working in local government for more than 15 years now, and there are 2 things that I love about local government, and one is cool projects with cool people, and the other one is that in local government we are not in competition with each other, and so I like bringing that together and being here tonight. We can share information with each other. We don't need to start from scratch, and we're often not the first ones to do things. And so, as staff, we're often asked to do more with less, and I think kind of sharing ideas across jurisdictions, particularly in this region, is a really effective way to start to move the needle as a region and not just focus on our own jurisdictions, because people don't care where the borders are, and they just want to be able to move around and get where they want to go. So thank you for having me, because I think these are things that I'm very interested in and I really like to talk about. So what I want to talk to you tonight about is how we've kind of built this culture of safety and options in our city, and it has not been easy, and let's see, kind of like this clicker. Where am I pointing this? You can just advance the slide if you want, if that's easier. Okay. So over the past 10 years, we have spent a lot of time crafting and adopting policies to really help us have that backing that we need to lay the groundwork for a lot of the types of projects that we're seeing. And so whether these are really large capital projects or just kind of small, quick designs that we're doing and incorporating into our overall street network through different things like resurfacing or development, it really all started in 2012 with our Complete Streets policy, which was kind of, we were testing it out and then we reaffirmed it in 2014. We also hired the first Complete Streets coordinator, which was me, in 2013. So I started out doing this for the city. And then we also developed some Complete Streets design guidelines that we put into our pedestrian and bicycle chapters of our transportation master plan. Looking back on it, there, again, we don't need to recreate things. I think NACDA, which is a transportation association, they have really good design guidelines out there. So in hindsight, we could have just used theirs, but we have our own that are very tailored to our city. We also in 2017 adopted a Vision Zero policy and worked really quickly that year to have an action plan that really guided how we were going to move forward with a bunch of strategies. Our goal for Vision Zero, we were being very ambitious and we went beyond just reducing all fatalities to zero in our city. We included fatalities and severe injuries. And so our goal is to do that by 2028. And we are, when you look at the year-over-year crashes, it's really nice to see that they're trending down. So we've got room to do better, but we are making progress. And then in 2021, we updated our transportation master plan and kind of replaced it with what we call the Alexandria Mobility Plan, which was really focused on creating options for people, being more inclusive, designing our streets for everybody. And of course, we're still moving cars, we still have streets, but we also want to make sure that everything is accessible and that we're looking at all modes. And then in most recently, this past year, we adopted a new policy for developers where we used to require our developers to have a transportation management fund if they were a certain size development, and they put their money into their own pot and they were supposed to spend it on, reducing single occupant vehicle trips and reporting back to us on how that was going. It was quite difficult to have them do this and to report back. And so our new policy now, they can pay into a citywide fund. So now the money is coming to the city so we can more quickly implement a lot of these solutions. So that's just kind of kicking off, but it's becoming a very valuable pot of funding that we can use for things like operations of our capital bike share stations or spot improvements in neighborhoods or local matches to grants that we're applying for. So another piece of this is that we've really tried to align these policies with our broader city goals, which I think is important for these transportation projects because when you're talking to the community, people might not be as focused on transportation, but maybe they're really focused on sustainability or they're really focused on equity. And all of the projects that we're doing are really touching all of these goals. So we have our mobility plan, we have a smart mobility framework that is looking at kind of congestion management through technology. We have a transit vision plan, an environmental action plan, and an all Alexandria initiative. So when we're talking to the community, we really try and tie our projects back to these broader initiatives that the city has adopted and said these things are important to us. And so we have those goals kind of outlined as a backbone for the projects we're trying to do. Go to the next slide. And then for our process, so this has definitely evolved over the past 10 years. And where we are now, we really use those larger planning efforts to identify our projects and kind of recommendations. And then what we've done more recently is we've shifted to doing more concept designs with community engagement along the way, but the concept designs, the cost estimates up front before applying for funding. And I think because in this area, a lot of the funding that we all seek for projects is 6 years out, it's kind of hard to do some of this planning even prior to that. And engaging the community that early on when you're not even going to have funding to construct something for 6+ years. But we've really kind of shifted our model to do this. And I think, with VDOT and a lot of the grants that we're going after, they're requiring this now too. They want more information up front. So we're kind of getting that buy-in from the community on the concepts at an early level and then applying for funding and then going into more of the community engagement and design before we construct the project. So we're constructing projects that we started working on 10 years ago. So they do, some of them do take time, some of them are really quick wins, but it's certainly not a fast process, but we're starting to see change on the streets. Okay, so how we are getting projects done. So we do projects, I think new development is one of the ways that we don't talk about a lot, but we get a lot done through new development, and our Complete Streets design guidelines really helped with that. That was the standard for, that we set for ourselves when we are looking at streets, but also for new development coming in. We're getting the curb extensions, the bus bulbs, the bus shelters, a lot of this infrastructure that people will see being built and don't realize like what went into kind of the decisions and all the policies that we have, how those are feeding into the design that the developers are doing and that they're building and installing for us. When we resurface our roads, so City of Alexandria, we own our streets, so VDOT does not own or maintain our streets. So when we do our street resurfacing, we're able to put in a lot of upgrades. We used to try and do more projects with resurfacing, bigger projects, and we saw that it was really hard to align those schedules and to hold our community engagement and our maintenance, trying to keep those on the same track, because it doesn't always work that way. So we can still do things, we install upgrade crosswalks, we try and transition all of our curb ramps to ADA with resurfacing, and we do a lot of bus stop upgrades, but we're not tying our really big projects to resurfacing now as much as we were before. And part of that is that with our Complete Streets program, we have a 5-year work plan. And so that really, we look at the resurfacing list, which is 3 years out, to see if we can tie things together, but we try and have this 5-year work program for Complete Streets. And that's also really helped us with a lot of the community requests that come in for projects. Because we can look back, we're trying to be more data-driven with Vision Zero, certainly, but our Complete Streets work program is, we're looking at the highest crash corridors that we have. We're focusing on safety, we're focusing on data, and so that helps us kind of set our plan to move forward and helps us to be a little more proactive rather than reactive to just community requests coming in where they want to see changes. I mean, I would say, too, one of the things I've handed out to you all are some work programs from our various programs that are within the transportation branch. We have started to do this with all of our programs. Complete Streets was one of the first that did it, and Vision Zero's had a number of reports, but we've started to try and do this and really lay out for the community. This is our work plan. These are the things that are key for this year. Here are the ongoing initiatives, and here were our successes from last year. Because I think one of the things that do the worst is talk about the good things that we do and then we get done. We implement projects and then we just move on to the next one, and we don't take the time to really celebrate and look back at all of the things that we've done. And so when I go back and I look on the website and I see all these vision work programs and how many of those strategies from the action plan, how many boxes we've checked and things that we've done, it is a ton of work that the team is doing, but these work plans have really helped us focus and kind of drive forward. So I just wanted to share some of those with you all for our programs. And then lastly, just our capital projects. We have our CIP for our 10-year CIP is at $500 million. We have a lot of really big capital projects. We have a lot of grant projects. We spend a lot of time going after grant funding. And we also have, we have a Complete Streets CIP project. That's where the funding for that comes. But we've also separated out some smaller programs, like our Safe Routes to School now has its own CIP. We also have a project planning CIP, which has been incredibly helpful. Kind of when we look back at that process and doing those concept designs early on, that's where that money comes from. So if we want to do work before we get a grant, we have this pot of funding where we can go to our consultants and say, hey, we need some renderings, we need to do some engagement, we need to figure this out at a very high level, get some cost estimates so that we're more prepared for the grants. That CIP project has been phenomenal for that, because we just have this pot of funding that we can go to and also use it for local matches if we need to. Is there another one? Okay. So we do have a couple of challenges. I think, these challenges are not specific necessarily to Alexandria. And the one that gets me the most is this engagement and equity paradox, because we are We value our responsiveness to our community, and we value our engagement with our community, and we also value equity. And those things often do not align, right? So, if we're listening to our residents and responding to them, to the residents who have the ability and the time to participate and the know-how to reach out to our city council members, to reach out to staff, to city leadership, to ask for things, that's a challenge because we want to be responsive, but that's not necessarily equitable, and then our resources are not always being distributed evenly. So that's a challenge that we've worked on. I think trying to be data-driven has helped us with that, particularly with Vision Zero and where we're focusing our projects, where we're focusing our grant efforts for larger projects. But I think it's a constant struggle and something we haven't, frankly, solved. Trade-offs are really hard. It's something we talk about a lot with the community. Anytime you make a change to a street, there is going to be a trade-off. Maybe you have to wait a little bit longer at the light so that somebody can cross. Well, what's more important to you, safety or the extra 30 seconds? And so we really try and talk to the community through the lens of the trade-offs that we're going to have to make. And one of the things I think we've gotten better about is when we are going out to the community and asking for feedback, we're asking them to prioritize trade-offs. We're not saying, do you like this concept or this one? We might say, what do you like about these concepts? But we're also saying, what's more important to you? Is travel time more important? Is safety more important? If you have to choose between a bike lane and a wide sidewalk, what are the things that you value so that we can make those engineering decisions? We're not asking the community necessarily to design our streets. We're trying to figure out what's important to them. So those are a lot of the conversations that we're trying to have now around our projects. I think we don't even need to spend time on this. Change is very hard for a lot of people. I think we've seen a big lack of trust in local government. We used to really trust our local governments the most, and that has gone down. So that has been something that we've really struggled with as we're trying to build relationships with our community partners. And then just conflicting community priorities. We have, in Alexandria, we have 160,000 residents. We have very different communities. We have Old Town, and that's very, very dense, very historic. Delray is a very neighborhood, Main Street centric community. The whole center of our city is very single family residential, and the whole West End is very high rise, multifamily, very diverse. So we have different communities, and they frankly have different priorities. And so as staff, we really have to think about that and try and balance those. And then just some of the lessons learned over the past 10 years, I think kind of aligning our goals with adopted plans really gives us as staff that backing and the kind of the groundwork to accomplish our projects and be able to, the first thing we do is say these are the goals of the project and tie them back to these policies that our city council has said these are things that are important to us. Building relationships early is something that we really try and work on. It's hard. It takes a lot of time. Figuring out who those key stakeholders are and having early conversations with them. We have our people in the community that we know have the ear of the community. We often go and meet with them before we even talk to the larger community to say, what are people going to say? What do you think your neighbors are going to say, if we present this, and how might we frame this to get people to understand where we're coming from? So we've been working to build those relationships and have those conversations, and it's proven to be very, very helpful in moving projects forward and not kind of getting hung up on the divisive projects. I think telling the right story and talking about trade-offs has been really helpful. Kind of looking back to what people are saying is important to them and who is saying it helps to kind of tell the story about why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. And then asking the right questions. I think for a long time we were asking the community the wrong questions when we were doing community engagement, and it was leading to things, outcomes that were not super helpful and then kind of divided the community. So we've gotten away from picking options, like I mentioned. But we also want to make sure that if we're asking the community for information, that we're going to be able to use it. So when I read the draft feedback forms that my teams are putting together, if there's a question, I'm like, how are we going to use this? What are we going to do if the answer is this? And if it's like, we can't, then take it out. Don't even ask it if we can't use that information. Let's make sure that we can use the information, we can report back to the community. This is the feedback we asked for, and this is how we've incorporated what you said into the project. And then setting aside money for project planning has been so helpful, and it took, a couple years of getting that CIP project in there. And there's not that much money in it. It's a couple $100,000. But having that pot of funding to be able to do better project planning, engage with the community, pull those consultants in when we need people to do bus stop chats and get that feedback for us, and not have to have staff trying to figure out how to fit that into their schedule has been really helpful and enabled us to kind of get that upfront engagement and frame our projects better. So I think I just have a couple pictures of some of the projects, some before and afters. This was our Seminary Road Complete Streets project, incredibly hard and divisive in our community. I don't even like to talk about it, but I'm on this road. I see people walking, I see people biking, people driving, some people taking the bus, and it is really nice to see how well it's being used. And we did an after report on this. And the traffic volume stayed the same, the travel time stayed the same, crashes went down, and pedestrian and bike volumes went up. So we felt like this was a win. Commonwealth Avenue is a street, there are a very neighborhood-focused street, lots of schools nearby, and there were some safe routes to school recommendations that came out of one of our school walk audits. And this was going to be really expensive to build. So we went out and we used paint and we striped things out. And it was, we put in these little bumps on the ground, these Zeklas and some flex posts, which some people liked, some people thought they were ugly, but whatever. They are making it safer, and people stop for the folks in the crosswalk, even when there's not a stop sign. They see it, it's more visible, it's very clear that kids are walking to school here. And this is just one of the intersections we did on Commonwealth. We did a number of them kind of in a row all around this school with these types of design treatments. That was just another example of a crossing there, the before and after. Rayburn and Reading Avenues, this was another Safe Routes to School project. Nobody in this community reached out and really said, we want a project here. But when we went out there and saw that how many people were walking to school, it's not a community that was super engaged with us or, frankly, had the time to participate in a lot of our projects. But there were no crosswalks. People were crossing mid-block. So we took these two streets and redesigned them for making it safer for people that were walking. And we tried to do engagement, didn't get a ton of feedback, but after we did it, we're out there and we're talking to people, and everyone was really pleased with how it turned out and that we actually paid some attention to their neighborhood, even though they weren't kind of screaming the loudest. Speed management has been a big thing we've been working on. It's a huge component of our Vision Zero plan and something that the community told us was really important to them when we did our action plan. So we've been lowering speed limits around the city a couple a year for the past several years, from 35 to 25. And then we recently installed our speed cameras now that the state allows us to do that in school zones. And so this was the first fall that we had those up and running. I don't have the total citation numbers. I know in the spring when we tested them, it was a lot. It was a lot of people speeding in these zones. So this is where kids are walking to school. So it's really important to reduce the speeds on these streets. So we're testing out that program, and we'll likely expand it to other schools. I think we have 5 cameras now. We have been installing hawk signals. Again, this is where kids are crossing to go to a school. I think, you're hearing a theme. We are trying to focus a lot of our efforts around where we're seeing a lot of crashes and around schools. And then North Van Dorn Street is one of our, we installed bike lanes here, removed a travel lane, kind of did a road diet. You see some flex post trying to make this feel a little safer. This is something we're working on. We have a number of streets in the city where we have buffered bike lanes, and now we're going back this spring and putting in flex post, Zikla bumps to make them feel safer. So, more kids will ride in the bike lanes and they'll feel more comfortable. I think part of what we try and do sometimes is it's incremental. A lot of the advocates really wanted the flex post up immediately when we did. They were like, let's just get the bike lanes in and see how it goes. Now we'll put this up and see how it goes. So sometimes it's making sure we can get something in, even if we know it's not perfect. It's not necessarily like the best design. We could go further, but sometimes it's just getting people used to how things look on the street before you take the next step. There's just some befores and afters of this street as well. So I think that might be the last one. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Well, very good. Thank you so much for everything you shared. You shared a lot of information, so I'm glad we record this, so at least I can go back and listen to it and pull out some of the pieces that intrigued me right from the start. I'm going to look to my right because these two planning commissioners are probably the most engaged in transportation issues on our panel. So would either of you like to jump in with a question or two? We've got time for a few questions.
I thought this was great. This is so exciting. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of this with us. A couple big picture thoughts. I really love the focus that you have on equity. I think the equity paradox is a really good way to put it. We have that same problem here. Question on that I was curious about, how are you deciding where to make your investments across Alexandria, because different neighborhoods have different needs? Is that data driven as well, based on sort of crash reports, or is it neighborhood requests, or how are those decisions made?
We are really trying to focus on crashes. I think one of the things that's interesting from Alexandria, and luckily, and it's great, we don't have a ton of serious crashes. So I used to work in New York City, and we're like, 20 people got hit at that intersection, let's go do something. Here, it's like over 5 years, 3 people got hit, and that's one of our high crash intersections. So we're trying to look at corridors where we do have higher crash rates, but we know that the design is more likely to cause crashes. So our higher speed corridors, we have kind of within our Vision Zero action plan, we were able to identify our higher crash corridors and within that intersections. For example, we applied for a Safe Roads for All federal grant, and that is for safety walk audits and concept designs for 7 of our high crash intersections. They're all on the west end. Mm-hmm. And part of that was, that grant was focused on equity. I think a lot of the money coming out of the federal government, equity is a big component, and it's a criteria for getting those. And so by putting in the higher crash locations that were in those equity areas, we scored better, and we were able to get $1 million just to do those walk audits.
That's great.
Trying to use data.
Yeah, I figured. I just love how everything kind of ties back to the city's vision and goals and values, and everything is rooted in that and in the plans that you have. And that is something we don't have. We have our transportation chapter, Mobility for All Modes, but we don't have a Vision Zero plan. We've talked about it, and we don't have Complete Streets plan. We've talked about it. We don't have a ped bike plan. We tried to do that, I guess, in 2011. I think having those plans is a big part of you being able to go to the community and say, this is why we're doing this work, or to go to council. Is that the case?
That is the case. I think we do these larger plans. It's a big planning effort, big community engagement effort, and people are like, great, this is great. And then you go do something in front of their house, and they're like, this is not great. Or they were not engaged in the larger plan. So I think implementation is always a challenge, and that's where we're really trying to step back, build those relationships, and socialize some ideas with folks before we come in full force. But it is helpful that these are things that the council has basically told us to do because we do have these plans.
Yeah, you feel like you have the backing of council. Yeah,
yes.
as staff. I really like the point you made about the don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. We're trying to stand up a sort of quick response transportation team and do more of those quick projects like the ones that you shared with the Flexi Posts. And I'm sorry, I didn't actually know. Is Zikla?
Oh, yes, they look like little
zebras.
They look like little zebras.
Yeah.
Yes.
Zikla hunt. We'd love to see more of that. So do you have a crew that does those kinds of implementation projects, or how do those come about? Because, they still require some design and engineering, right?
Yeah. So we're actually, I'm looking to hire somebody that can just do some quick CAD work, that can be on our team to do that kind of thing, because our council has said, go faster, do more of these things. Why are they taking so long? And it's like, well, because one, there's still, even when you're doing that level, you still need to look at turn movements and can people get around? And what does a flex post mean for the
Right.
snow people, right?
Or the bus.
Yeah, the buses. And so we're trying to do more of it. And I think some of what we've been thinking about is we have these longer term capital projects. And so if we can do the concept design with the community early, when we're doing that and we're applying for a grant that we're not going to get for 6 years, we're also now looking like, are there short-term things that we could stripe out, paint, do something quick now so that we can get something in the ground, and then we come back and build it later? Or we test things out and then, go out and try and get a grant to do it, kind of backwards.
Yeah,
But,
I think we'd love to see more of that kind of incremental approach here as well.
and it's still tough. It is still not easy. We get a lot of pushback on paint and flex post, and they're ugly, and why are they in Old Town and that kind of thing. So it's still change. But I think the more we do it, the more people will get used to it and kind of understand why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah.
Puentes, did you have a question?
Go ahead.
Thank you, this is very, very good. You didn't mention parking once, I'm glad you guys figured out parking problems.
Oh, we've
and
solved it.
That's great. But seriously, so it was interesting, you talked about the challenges with the TDM plans from the developers, and you scrapped kind of the monitoring of that to have them support this fund. Can you talk a little more about what the challenges were with monitoring those TDM plans? It was staff capacity or just
So we
developers?
have over 100 existing TMPs, and these are folks that are property managers. They've been assigned the role of TMP coordinators. They have no idea what this is, what they're supposed to be doing. So we reach out to them. We provide a feedback form, like, tell us how you've spent your money. They're like, what money are you talking about? I started 6 months ago. There's tons of turnover. The email address has changed. It was really hard. And then getting them also to kind of survey the residents to report back on how things are going, and if, who's doing what. Are we really reducing the trips that we said we were going to reduce? I mean, nobody's answering those. Like, I love those kind of things. So I was like, oh, when I live in an apartment, I would always answer. But like, most people are not like that and do not want to do it. And they weren't providing the right incentives, and nor are they like professional surveyors. So I think there were just a lot of challenges. And so we've said, if we really want to understand if the mode split that we are saying, like, yes, you're saying you want this mode split, we're giving you that in your development and you're designing around it, that's on us to really go back and do that data analysis, figure out if we were right, because we keep doing it. We keep approving different developments, and we should really go back and understand, was what you guys said you were going to do, is that right? Because we're going to look to the next development, and we need to start looking at, now that things are actually constructed and people are using them, we have to figure out if our methodology was correct. And so that's on us.
And how long have you been doing this?
Doing the TMP.
The new structure?
It was approved in June. So we are now, the existing TMPs can opt into this program, provide their fund balance to us, and start paying. The previous policy, there was no end date. So developments do have an incentive. We have a 30-year end date now. So if they've been paying into and doing it for 15 years, once they opt in, they only have 15 years to go, and then they're done. So that was kind of we spent a lot of time talking to the development community to understand, what do you all need to kind of shift to this new methodology.
It's an elegant idea. I think it's a great, something we should probably think about too, I think.
I think so.
The one comment, your challenges slide all seem to speak to the same challenge, which was the disconnect between the city's vision and implementation and kind of the reality on the ground. So I'm just happy to hear you talk through those and recognize that that's always some of the tension there is between the great progressive vision you lay out for transportation and the reality getting it done in the neighborhoods.
Yes, we have not solved all the challenges, but we do recognize them.
Just one question for me, and we'll go on down the line here. You mentioned some of your projects take as much as 10 years in advance to do the planning. I'm just wondering, with the significant inflation that we've had over the last couple of years, how difficult does that make a 10-year, planning out for a 10-year project?
Very. It's really hard. I think one of the things that we've also started doing is, we have these old legacy projects that were here before I even started with the city, and I've been there 13 years now. And we have definitely taken a bunch of intersections and gone back or corridors and said, was this right? We did this with our Duke Street bus rapid transit. They had adopted a concept in 2012, and by the time we had the funding to move forward, it was 2020. And we're like, let's take the next 2 years. We're going to step back and check in with the community. What are your priorities now? Does this still align? Do we need to change it? The answer was yes. And we kind of came forward with a new concept that we're advancing now that we have the funding. We got the concept, we're ready to go. We're moving into design on that. And that was an $87 million project. And so when these projects take a long time, I think it's our responsibility to stop and say, does this align with where our vision is now? Because things change over time. I mean, we have projects that we look at now, we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we designed that. That's not as safe as it should be. We forgot to look at pedestrians 10 years ago, so we're trying to step back and do some redesign with some of our projects. But it is a real challenge because
Costs can double.
Well, and I think we don't know how people are going to be getting around in the future. I mean, we talk about bike lanes right now, but when we were having these Duke Street conversations, we were trying to tell the community, I'm seeing people on one wheels. We have scooters, who know those things were coming, and they are also in that bike space. So do you want them on the sidewalk with pedestrians, or do you want to separate and have space? Because there is going to be more and more of this, people are using different types of travel modes now. So we've got to plan for it and make sure that we're designing flexibly for some of these spaces and how people are getting around, because we don't know what it's going to be.
Thank you. Mr. Krasner, did you have a question?
Not particularly. I think I think it's interesting to see what you guys are doing. I think there's a lot of parallels. There are things we could work on implementing to scale. Alexandria is still many times bigger than we are, but I think that it's I do see a lot of things we could adapt. I guess maybe one thing you mentioned at the beginning, how much of it is done through does Alexandria use a proper system? How does Alexandria, as far as through new development, how are you mentioned the TDM stuff, but how about other contributions? Is there any other types of, actual proffers or other things that you're getting through
we have voluntary contributions, and then we have development conditions. So in the conditions, they'll put in the site plan if they're building a curb extension or something. But then we do have development conditions for things we'll get conditions or voluntary contributions for things like capital bike share. So, we have a formula we look at to make it equal across developments based on the size, what their contribution to the capital bike share system would be, or if they're going to have one near their new building.
Okay. Any other last questions? Go ahead.
So thank you. This was actually really informative. I want to echo everybody that I think there's lots of things that we could probably start to implement. But I do want to ask a question about development. And you had mentioned that sometimes the maintenance schedules for resurfacing doesn't properly align with development. And the sequencing of when those developers are going to do that work. So in the proffers, are you going after, well, we're not going to want to do it now, but we're going to want you to temporarily surface, and then we're going to want dollars to come back and do it when we do our actual maintenance of the whole road?
Yeah, so I think when part of the construction of a building involves resurfacing a road, we wait for them to do that. If we know a building's coming in, it's on a resurfacing list, we might go in and pave anyway, just to make sure that it's safe. I think when I was saying the maintenance doesn't align, a lot of times it doesn't align with our community engagement schedule. And so we've had projects where we're trying to rush through engagement because we're trying to keep up with the need to do maintenance. And that was creating kind of some clashes, and we don't want to defer maintenance. That just makes it more expensive. So, but we work with the developers and utility companies on all of the kind of resurfacing and maintenance coordination.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, Ms. Orr, thanks again very much. We really appreciate your taking your time and sharing your considerable expertise with us. And like I said, I'm glad this is recorded so we can all go back and have another listen.
Yes, thank you. We have lots and lots of information on our website, but I think you all have my email here, so please feel free to reach out if you all ever need anything. And thank you for having me.
Thank you again so much. Okay, I think we're on to receipt of petitions. Mr. Trainer, do we have any members of the public who would like to address the Planning Commission?
I do not have any registered speakers.
Okay, that allows us to move into our action items. The first item is our minutes. Does anyone have any edits to propose to the minutes? Seeing none, would someone like to move to adopt the minutes?
I move we adopt the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting on October 18th, 2023.
Do we have a second? We have a second, Mr. Puentes. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, seeing none. One abstention, Mr. Krasner. Otherwise, we have minutes adopted. I think we're okay then to move into our first work session item. Mr. Stoddard, would you like to introduce the item?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. The first item up, let's see, on your item is your work session. This is the first time you're seeing this application. This is on what's titled the Stratford Garden project proposal. It's at the current location of the Stratford Motor Lodge, which has been vacant for some time. Tonight, your request, as I mentioned, this is your first time seeing this, so you're requested to review the staff comments, receive a presentation from the applicant, as well as provide direction back to them. Before I turn it over to the case planner, Mr. Jeff Hollern, I will just briefly summarize the recommendation from staff, and that is that in reviewing the project proposal in consideration for the comprehensive plan and the small area plan that the community's adopted, there's a lot to like about the project proposal, and so that's why we led with that in our staff recommendation. And then in the second paragraph, you'll see that we do have some technical concerns that we raised in terms of meeting the development regulations that are on the books. And so I don't want the sort of minutia of this to sort of take away from it's a very promising project proposal. And so really the question is, how do we get this into final form? But with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jeff Hollern.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jeff Hollern with the Planning Staff. As Paul had mentioned, the Planning Commission is requested to hold a work session on the site plan application for the proposed Stratford Garden Restaurant. As he had mentioned, staff finds that the proposed use and the development program are generally consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the small area plan, and staff is supportive of the proposed use. However, we have highlighted a short list of key items for the Planning Commission's review, which may require additional attention by the applicant. First, the staff has requested that the applicant provide a justification of a waivers narrative to provide more background on why certain requirements are not able to be met. Second, staff has also requested color elevations and clear description of proposed materials which should be included within the next submittal. Third, staff is looking for some revision to the loading and trash areas to meet some functional requirements. Fourth, the current parking calculation is based on the indoor space as the customer area. The project includes considerable outdoor seating, and this should be considered within the parking calculation. This may result in the request for a parking reduction. And these are all in addition to other staff technical comments. So as a summary of the Stratford Garden Restaurant site plan, the applicant is Walter Phillips. The applicant proposes to partially renovate the Stratford Motor Lodge and construct a new two-story restaurant with indoor and outdoor seating, consisting of approximately 7,596 square feet of gross floor area, a large outdoor dining area, and surface parking. The application is for site plan approval with several requested waivers. There are several waivers for parking lot landscaping adjacent to public streets along Little Falls along Little Falls Street. There's a waiver for a parking lot landscaping adjacent to abutting properties along the northern and western boundaries. There's a waiver for interior parking lot requirements, landscaping requirements, and there is a waiver for the site plan requirement for a lighting plan. Pursuant to code, the site plan code, the site plan applications are subject to city review and approval by the Planning Commission. In addition, City Code outlines several conditions that apply to permitted uses within an OD district. One that applies here is that the applicant shall apply and confer at the initial and preliminary stages with the Planning Commission in order to provide use, architecture, and site planning that is correlated with the objectives of architecture and land uses within the OD district. The site is occupied by the now vacant Stratford Motor Lodge, which closed in October of 2021. It is surrounded by other OD and B2 zoned properties consisting of retail, commercial, and multifamily apartment uses. It is also worth noting that the OD district allows for uses categorized as by right under B1 districts, of which this is one of them. The Land Use and Economic Development chapter of the city's comprehensive plan identifies goals for different areas of the city. The proposed development includes many of the elements called for in the city's comprehensive plan, including goals and strategies outlined through several chapters, such as the promotion of redevelopment, renovation, and facade and landscaping improvement efforts in the Broad and Washington Street corridors, the promotion of day and nighttime consumer and pedestrian activity in the commercial corridors to increase liveliness, safety, and opportunities for residents to dine, shop, and recreate within the city. And that is not to mention that the land use chapter encourages us to continue to identify commercial properties that are underutilized or in need of renovation and development strategies for their revitalization and redevelopment. As I mentioned before, the applicant is requesting multiple waivers of the site plan requirements related to landscaping and site lighting. Staff has requested that the applicant provide a waiver justification narrative with their next submission. Lines 184 to 200 of the staff report discuss the extent of each of these landscape waivers. As for parking, the applicant is proposing a surface parking lot with 33 parking spaces, including 2 handicap spots. City code would require a total of 22 spaces for the 2,157 square feet of indoor restaurant space. However, the zoning administrator has identified that the outdoor dining space, approximately 15,000 square feet, needs to be included in the parking calculation. The required parking exceeds the parking provided, and the applicant would then need to request a parking reduction. As for timing, this site plan is going to be brought in front of the Architectural Advisory Board and the Urban Forestry Commission, hopefully before heading back to you all in late December. And with that, I will turn it back to the chair. The applicant is here. They have a presentation for you all as well.
Okay, I think we can welcome the developer then, if you'd like to go ahead and share some comments with us. Again, this is a work session, so not so formal tonight.
Hi, guys. My name is Arash Tafakor. I'm a co-owner of Dominion Wine and Beer right on Broad Street. First off, I'd like to thank you guys, Falls Church Planning Commission, the city staff and city council, and more importantly, the citizens of Falls Church for all the support throughout the years for our restaurant. I also like to thank Karen White of Walter Phillips guiding us through this process, as well as our architect, Matt Lee, partner, Jeff King, and Francois Fassard of our design firm. Last year, we were approached to renovate the Stratford Motor Lodge and turn it into a beautiful restaurant that we would like to use to serve the community. Beautiful green space. Just continue to give great customer service, good food, and just a family-friendly, overall nice place. I think it's going to be a great addition to Falls Church. We are super excited to be able to invest in the city because the city's given myself and my family so much. And I'll just turn it to Karen to speak more on the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Karen White with Walter Phillips, and I'm going to go through the details of the site, and then I'll turn it over to Matt Lee to talk about architecture. So I guess I don't have a clicker. Do you want me to? Great. So here's the site here at Broad Street in Little Falls. I assume most of you are familiar with it. I'll kind of go through some of this a little quickly if I can. Maybe we can go to the next. Maybe I'm too far. Oh, there we go. Here, the next two slides here are just kind of street view, existing conditions. Again, I think everyone's familiar with the property. We can go, there's Broad Street, and then the next is Little Falls. And then the next site here, the next view is just the next page, if you want to go. Okay, great. It's just the site plan here. So kind of want to stop with this for a minute and kind of talk through what we're proposing. And I do want to note that if you looked at our plans earlier, we have already made some changes that we've looked at staff comments and have already kind of made some changes that I'll talk about. So as mentioned, we're going to demolish the majority of the existing hotel building and keeping the kind of the restaurant corner lobby building that was there and expanding onto that. So that area will remain, and then you'll kind of see two hatchings. Does this have I don't know if it has here we go, kind of two hatching colors after that. So basically this is the existing building, and then there'll be an existing kind of enclosed, like just a renovation here. And then what we've added since we've submitted to is this extra covered area too, to make it more of a covered roofed area even beyond the actual building itself too. So you have more of a covered outdoor dining area for maybe more seasons of the year. We have parking off of Little Falls here with 23 spaces, as we mentioned. Let's see what else. I wanted to note one thing that you'll note that we'll go through in detail, but we have since submitted, we have actually increased some landscaping along the border on this site here. We've added some more trees. We've also looked at adding some more street trees along Little Falls. We are proposing our bike racks right along here. This is the main entrance of the restaurant right here, and here's our proposed bikes are sitting right around here. In general, we're decreasing impervious area about 5%. That'll be more actually when we redo the numbers with this here. So we are reducing impervious area on the site. The site actually has no trees actually on the property today. So we are proposing 10 canopy trees and 7 understory trees. So we will be adding some landscaping here. And to be clear, and so basically, as again, existing building, addition, roofed area, and then this will mostly be hardscape all around, some different materials. This is going to kind of be of a more gravelly, usable space, but then there will be some landscaping buffers along the end here. And then if we can go to the next. So these items are similar to the items that they listed in the staff report of the staff concerns. So I kind of just wanted to go through them one at a time to talk through them. So the first one is parking. So as mentioned, you can go to the next slide. Here we go. So when we first applied, we were just including, in our first application, we just include this indoor area. Again, that showed we were underparked, I believe, with 22 space. Sorry, we had excessive parking. We only needed 22. We have 33. So we want to have set up a meeting with planning and zoning to really confirm what's required. Right now, if we include the outdoor covered area, we then need 39 spaces. So even with that, we still would need some reduction of 33. I think we do want to visit with zoning and talk about how much of that outdoor space do we really need to count for this 100 square feet, because it's 100 square feet. One space for 100 square feet of space used by customers. So that's kind of interesting when you get to an outdoor space where there'll probably be people moving around, and how does that really work? So I guess what I'm saying is that I believe we will need a waiver for the parking. I think the waiver might increase next time we see you, depending how that conversation comes out with zoning of what's really required for the code. And what we're providing here is the 33 spaces. The next item was the loading. So as you'll see on the application, we have here we go. The trash dumpsters are in this area, and we had this area in the back here as a loading zone. And there was a good staff comment made of how does this really work? So if you can go to the next slide, we really talked about, like, realistically, how is the loading going to work, and when is the loading going to happen? The loading is going to happen in the morning before the restaurant's open. So trying to realistically come up with a plan that says what's really going to happen, and is that okay? Because the parking lot's going to be empty, to be honest, right? So the truck's going to come in, the trash truck, they'll pull out the bin, flip it, come back, they can turn and leave. And even if you had a box truck that would come, it could realistically come in here, park. They would roll, just park like kind of a lay-by, take out materials into the restaurant. They could do some sort of turnaround and come back out. So we really kind of wanted to talk about, and we've had some initial talks with staff about this, but does it just make sense to maybe come up with like a loading plan to show how this would work? Sometimes maybe we reserve some parking spaces that, you can only park in these couple spaces before, between 6 and 11 or something to allow that to work. But getting a way to really make the loading work and functional that kind of meets everybody's needs. So that's one thing we just kind of wanted to walk through today. The next thing is the waiver summary. So again, here's a list of the waivers that were mentioned earlier. To adding, looks like we will probably need a parking reduction waiver, and then possibly the off-street loading waiver might be needed as well. So if we can go to the next page, here we go. So I just wanted to summarize where these are and what we were asking for. So the first item here, actually, waiver requested for perimeter parking lot landscaping adjacent to public streets. So technically, right here and right here, we need a street tree for that 10-foot buffer. What we've actually proposed is we're going to propose to put a tree here and here. So proposing those trees, we've just shifted them to where they work better with the site. This is the existing transformer, and we are trying to keep a lot of this existing walkways along here, not touching as much as we can. Number 2, we were originally requesting the waiver for the perimeter parking lot landscaping along the north and the west. We'll be deleting this request as we're now providing the buffer on this side. But here we are our goal is to keep probably about this area of the parking lot and not touch it at all. So we're trying to limit our disturbance, keep this asphalt as is. The existing building ends like about here, so the rest of this would just remain as is. Therefore, we don't really want to dig up, some of this asphalt, and also it would also impact the parking if we added that landscape strip. Number 3, the interior parking lot landscaping. As we said, now we are confirmed we are underparked, so we don't really, so we're concerned about losing spaces to provide additional trees. But as I said, we were able to provide additional trees here instead of, inside the parking area. The requested lighting plan. So I think the intent of requesting this waiver was just to kind of try to keep this simple, this review simple, and, and try to not keep as a lot of the existing site as we can, as it is, meaning this parking area here, the streetscape. So what we are proposing to do is to add some building-mounted lighting at these 2 corners, which were not on the original submission, but we've talked about, to provide some lighting into the parking lot, so it is lit. And then the last 2 waivers listed here are what we talked about are the parking and the loading. And then I'm going to hand it over to Matt to talk about architecture.
Thank you, Karen.
Yep.
Thank you guys for having me tonight. My name is Matt Lee. I'm the owner of Lee Design Studio and the architect of record for the project. Appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of the Planning Commission tonight and present the project to you. And as a member of the community and a local business, I'm very excited to see this project go forward and turn this corner around and add to the growing list of projects in the city. As Kara Rosh mentioned, we're removing the larger of the 2 buildings, and we're going to be keeping the smaller building along West Broad. The existing building will be turned mostly into the kitchen space and food prep area, and then we're going to wrap it with the seating along it and that's facing the lawn space. The existing parking lot will be cleaned up and turned into a landscaped area and more green space as Karen described. We're planning on using high-quality finishes and materials to give the project a clean and modern look, while allowing the existing architecture to remain and be part of the building's story. As you can see for the rendering, where am I going, Karen? There. Little Falls elevation, we're keeping the existing building, where was that pointer? Oh, there we go. Existing building to remain, and we're adding kind of the wrap around the seating area, covered area that we discussed. My clickers, oh, just a little delay.
Sorry, I don't know if that's working. Just
Yep,
let me
okay.
know. If
Gotcha. Next slide, please, for the renderings. Awesome. So this is a view from the landscaped area facing the inside of the courtyard. Next slide, please. And this is a great view from Little Falls. showing that covered seating, showing the new seating area, and then the existing building that we'll be cleaning up and renovating. I'm here to answer any questions you guys have.
Is that it for the developer then? Okay, so it's our turn. I'll say just before we start in that I attended the City Council's Economic Development Committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was, and the support for the project was, as they say, palpable. So someone would like to start off with a question or comments from the Planning Commission?
I can go first.
Please.
This is such an exciting project. I think it's the exact kind of use that we want to see in the city. It's, going to remove what is currently an eyesore and replace it with a community gathering place that I think a lot of people will enjoy, as I think many have enjoyed Dominion's restaurant as well. Really glad to see the street trees on the west side, those buffer, not street trees, the west side buffer trees. That's a really nice addition, so thank you for that. I had a couple questions. I was curious about the number of bathrooms that you all have in the building. Is that required by code? And you have sort of two separate bathrooms, it look like. There's like an
Sure.
indoor access bathroom area and then an outdoor out area as well. They're kind of two
Go back to
bathrooms
the
back to
architectural.
back. I don't know if that's in your presentation, but it was in
Yeah,
the.
in the architectural plan, I think. There you go. Sure, so like Arash mentioned, we're very excited to be serving the community and have a great situation. So those bathrooms are facing out towards the lawn space, for assuming people are gathering out there and giving direct access to the lawn, and then you'd have indoor bathrooms as well
Okay,
to serve the indoor space. Yeah,
I guess
it's-
I'm just used to some of the older uses here that have a much smaller number of that just seem like a lot, so I was curious
Yes,
about that.
yeah.
But is that required by code, or that's just what you all feel like you need for the use?
But yes, and. So we
Okay.
went above what code is requiring.
Okay. I think the only comment I have for you, and because you have a lot of the sort of back of the house uses fronting on Broad and Little Falls, the kitchen and the driveway, there isn't really a lot of activity that's visible to like a pedestrian walking by, particularly on Broad Street. And I think even the addition that you have with the sort of stucco, I think it looked like you added a few windows in that addition. Is that right? If you could go to that slide, maybe. I just want to look at so we're all looking at the same thing.
Next one.
Yeah, this one. So those are, they're originally the plans that were submitted to us. There was like one window that looked like maybe a service window, but these are three smaller windows at a higher height. And if I understand correctly, this is like a service hallway. Is that right, to access the patio?
Correct, and to be able to serve out of that side.
Right. Yeah, I guess, I mean, in my perfect world, you would be able to see into the restaurant and see all the lovely people enjoying their dinners, because that's what we want to see from Broad Street. That's what is going to draw people into the business. So I'm not saying it's a deal breaker for me personally, but it's just definitely something I noticed that I think is maybe a missed opportunity for this project. I don't know what the solution to that would be, but I'm just noting it. And I would also ask that, maybe there's some more creative use than just stucco on the side there. If that is going to be sort of a blank wall for people walking down Broad Street, I'd really rather have it be something that's a little more interesting than stucco. And again, I don't have any specific recommendations, just noting it.
Sure.
That's all for me.
Okay. Mr. Puentes, did you have anything?
Sure, I agree with the comments, especially the West Broad facing there. I'd like to see some better treatment to that. Not really a fan of the parking lot waivers for landscaping. Very willing to provide waivers for the parking number. I totally understand the point that you want to keep it as it is and keep it less disturbed. It's not a very attractive parking lot the way it is now. Maybe if there's some relationships with neighboring businesses, you can figure out some shared parking or something else. Like to see that, but really excellent use of the space, and don't have any major problems beyond that. Thanks.
Okay, on this side, you want to go? Brent?
Sure. Well, first off, I see like on the name you have, Stratford. I'm wondering if that's a placeholder. I mean, I don't know about the rest of my colleagues, but I don't think the current name means anything to the City of Falls Church or evokes any good memories or things that we want to treasure and preserve for posterity. So I would have no problems with you picking an entirely new name that you may like better, unless that's just there as a placeholder. Calling it the Stratford, I don't know. I think we don't need to. I don't think we need to keep that name living on. That's at least that's my view of that, the former business there. But anyway, more seriously, I had a few questions, concerns, just about some of the choices here, and I kind of understand, what the overall is trying to be accomplished here. That stone surface that is going to be on Broad, and well, first of all, like having a gravel area. I mean, I'm wondering, during like the colder months of the year, what that's going to look like and, how that's going to be treated. Also, I think there are ADA implications if you have gravel. Gravel's not ADA accessible. So that may be a building code issue code issue for as far as that. I mean, that's a question. I don't know. I mean, the applicant can come back up. I'm not just going to, I mean, how's that going to be used? I mean, I see it like for outdoor seating. Are you including that as part of your outdoor seating? Like, what is that? I mean, right now, like, I see the curb cut being, like, shown to remain, but then I see a wrought iron fence across it, and then gravel,
So the gravel, we were also struggling, to be honest. We really didn't want to kick up a lot of, like, technical land disturbance from, like, an engineering perspective. So we're kind of balancing some things. So back where the gravel, and maybe we're using the wrong term, but I think we're thinking a very small, I keep saying gravel, but a very.
It says jackstone, which I guess is like a river.
Yeah, like kind of like
but
I think I can think of some parks that have it, but that I think would be considered accessible, and that you would. I can think of a park in Arlington that has it. I don't know unfortunately what it's called, but something not. I do think the rendering makes it look more like a bigger stone than I think the intent. But I think all those things we do have in mind, and the thought is to have tables and chairs in that area.
Right.
So you would be walking on it to go to those.
Would that be used in the colder, I mean, I guess in the colder months, it, wouldn't really be usable. So I'm just concerned that it, kind of becomes like a empty kind of, gravel area that sits there for 6 months of the year, not looking all that attractive, right on Broad Street. And is that also, there was a detail in here for that area showing like a wrought iron fence. I know it's in there kind of as a typical. Is that where you're talking about? Like, where is that fence going? Because it's not in the renderings, but it's on the sheets.
Well, there's a wall today along Broad that would remain. There's like a brick wall. And then I believe the fence, I mean, we are going to enclose the area, so there would be a gate. So someone would have to walk around from Broad through the entrance. There's exit gates for maintenance or emergency egress. And when you're talking about the wrought iron, let me look at this.
There's
real
like a
quick.
detail in the sheets on offline.
Oh, yeah, that's just that. That is, yes, that's right there. That is proposed along, like, between along the left property line. So along between this and the Broaddale Shopping Center.
So separating this property from
Yes,
Broaddale?
enclosing the property, yes.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously, like, I'm not talking about, I don't think we're asking for like a vehicle interparcel, but like a pedestrian interparcel, to Broaddale. I don't know. I just feel like the more we can encourage like interparcel along here, the better. Like right now, I always find it like kind of frustrating how like some of these sites are completely boxed in and enclosed, and as a pedestrian, you have to kind of go out and around and.
But don't park at one and go to the other, though.
Well, like, yeah, and I get all that, but like if you're, the idea that if you're in one and then you want to go to the next one in here, you'd have to, if it's fenced off, you'd have to walk all the way around, and so I don't know if that's something you could look at. Grant, I know you need the other party to agree to like an interparcel, but you could do it on your side, and then and then we can pursue it on the other side at a future date. So nothing prohibits you from doing it. So that's something I would also recommend, that we look at a way to allow for at least pedestrian interparcel over there. Let's see, I mentioned the curb cuts. So, I mean, I think I know why you would prefer to not touch those, but I mean, I don't know how staff feels about that. I think I saw a comment somewhere in there about that. I just feel like, I understand, I understand the cost, obviously, I'm sure it's coming down to cost. It's very expensive to start messing with that, but, I'm wondering just even from like a safety standpoint, to have blank curb cuts, sitting in the right of way that like pull, I think it's probably an unlikely situation that someone might confuse that and try to pull into one of those and, but like, I just, ideally those would be removed, so that we're removing, blank curb cuts. So, staff, it was in the staff comments, I don't know, who's doing this for staff? Where did he go?
I think
Jeff's there. He's hiding behind the podium. So I saw that in the list of staff comments, the curb cuts. Was that coming from transportation or from engineering? It was in there from somebody.
So we did get a comment amongst ourselves in planning. I think it was actually CPAD's director, Jim Snyder, that brought it up initially, was that, typically for projects like these, we like to try to find ways of getting those the bus stops in. And so maybe right there would be a good spot to fill in that curb cut and potentially have a designated spot for one of those. That's probably the comment that you saw.
Maybe, yeah. I think there was something, someone mentioned about like, the curb cuts remaining and, do we want to allow them to remain?
Yeah, I think that comment was made jointly by planning as well as engineering about generally, to your point of not wanting to leave unused curb cuts. The specific point about the bus stop today, there is a bus stop on that block face. It is inside the tree planters, and so if that curb cut's not in use for vehicle access, I think it would be a good idea to use it for use that space otherwise. A typical bus needs somewhere between 30 and 40 feet of clear space so that you can safely access both the front and rear doors. And with this site plan, you would have the ability to use that space along West Broad for a better located bus stop.
Okay, yeah, I would just echo the concern that, it's something that we want to think about, what that looks like, and to have the, blank curb cuts, living on. What else? I'll echo the concern about, staff mentioned it several times, the lighting, parking lot lighting, the need to do that. They're just, I understand, trying to make this kind of a lean project, but, I get it, but, I think some things are, safety issues. And so, I don't know if I'd be comfortable granting a complete waiver from parking lot lighting. There are different ways to do it, and I don't know, it's not, but I think that that's something that is a legitimate concern. Since this is a restaurant, it's going to be active into the evening, into the later hours of the night, and so having parking lot lighting, I don't know why we would waive that. That's kind of, standard, to have to provide that. Same thing with the landscaping. I can also echo other comments about looking seriously at doing that. The site today is, right, it's an eyesore. And so, while we're very excited to have an active, vibrant use there, for sure, I think we all share that. It still has to live up to a standard that we expect along Broad Street in a very high-profile part of the city, in an area that the comp plan pays a lot of attention to as far as quality of design. Which leads me also to the choices in the building. I understand you're trying to keep the building as it is, but yeah, I agree, stucco, I think on Broad, matching with the old brick and leaving the wrought iron kind of railing. I just feel like that building, it was built at a different time when the city sort of thought of itself as a colonial styled village, with a lot of colonial architecture. I think what's been built in the last 20 years has departed from that. I understand the idea of wanting to keep it, but I would think of this is, for the architect, think about ways to modernize it, bring this into like the 21st century, the third decade of the 21st century. And there are ways you can do that without a wholesale, refacing, but like stucco and the old, leaving the brick, maybe paint the brick, maybe get rid of those wrought iron, white railings. Like, it's not New Orleans, I don't know what they were thinking on that. Maybe at the time they liked it. Maybe my colleagues like it. It's a design choice, but I just think it looks terrible with those railings. And I think to keep it, if there's an efficient way to make it look more modern and contemporary with what's around it, look what it's right across from, and try to be a little bit, speaking to like the design that we've been seeing, would be great if you could do that. I just think that we don't want it to look like, you appended a newer thing and it literally left it, as you found it, because I don't think it's worth keeping it as you found it if there's any way to improve it. You know, I wouldn't, I don't, maybe my colleagues feel differently. I don't think anyone thinks that's like something we want to preserve for posterity and have that live on for happy memories of what the Stratford Motor Lodge was, at least in the last 12 years I've lived here. I mean, and I think longer than that. So, you know, anything, the more we can do to forget it was the Stratford Motor Lodge, I think would be great. So we can walk by it and say, I don't forget there was ever a motor lodge there. Now there's this new exciting restaurant. So anyhow, that's it. I'll stop talking. But overall, I love the idea. Cool concept. I love your other business in town. This has a lot of potential, but it is a high-profile site, and we still want it to kind of live up to a certain standard that we expect along Broad Street. That's it for me.
Okay, Sharon, did you want to jump in?
Thank you. I'm really excited about this project. I want to say that wholeheartedly. I am so excited to see the Stratford change. I do want to echo a lot of the architectural comments that my colleague had, because I too am kind of wondering why we have a new appendage that is, tied to an existing thing. And maybe there are ways to actually modernize that existing structure. To tie those two pieces together, because right now it does look like two separate buildings that kind of smashed together. And so I'm excited to see that transformation as you develop this further. My initial comments were that it was called the Stratford Garden, and I was very excited to see this like tranquil, total garden environment that was like this escape and oasis from the busyness of West Broad Street, and the materials that we got didn't show any of that. So I was happy to see it developed a little bit more in the renderings, but I really feel like there's a great opportunity there for the side on the west side of the property that you're calling it river rock, and now it's turning into gravel. So it's really hard to tell, and there's turf that's there, so it looks like a dog run almost. So I'm a little bit concerned because the rendering looks great. I still don't understand what that turf area looks like. These are now permeable pavers. But I really want to see that developed into more of an oasis, to kind of make it feel like you really are getting away from the bustle of West Broad. And I think when you start to develop that, you'll be able to see that from West Broad Street over that brick wall. And I think you'll start to see inklings of that by little viewpoints here and little viewpoints there. There's something better on the other side of that wall, and maybe there's a little bit of hint of the landscaping up there too. So I see a lot of potential, and it's very exciting to kind of see that take shape on this lot. I do want to echo the same comments about the elevation along West Broad, to articulate that more and maybe have that speak to what's across the street. I was kind of excited that there was a delivery window in the corner, and now it's gone. And so I was like, oh, now I actually have to like walk all the way around the restaurant and into that back to get any takeout if I wanted to do that. So I was kind of bummed to see that little takeout window go, and I thought that was a way that you could activate that front portion along the sidewalk. The lighting at the parking lot, I am kind of concerned just about the safety factor. I'm concerned that I'm glad that you're adding lights to shine out there, but that almost seems like it would be too glary in order to like actually give a good light candle of safety in that parking lot so that people aren't tripping and falling on their way back to their car. It is pretty dim out there now, if you've been out there at night. So there's not a lot out there anyway that's existing to remain to light up that space. I do believe that there are some existing trees that are in that median next to the Christian Science Reading Room, I think.
Yes, they're on the other property, but there are trees on there.
There are
yes.
some there,
Yes, there are
so but that's going to block any lighting that's in that parking lot. So I don't know how much is in there. It's really dim, and it's hard to know if whatever's there has been turned off because just because it's vacant. So I think seeing a lighting study with some foot candles would be helpful. And I was curious about the intent of that turf area but I think we talked about that, like maybe developing that more as a garden, in keeping with the title of the property. And again, I'm not tied to Stratford, but I did like the idea of a garden oasis. The comments about the bus shelter and the existing curb cuts, I would like to see the streetscape standards kind of come through those curb cuts, and just to be consistent, because I am concerned that people could drive into where the bike parking is, and I think that would lend a degree of consistency to the pedestrian experience. And then once that happens, you can think about where that bus stop should live in a more holistic idea of that facade and how that facade works and where that bus stop should be within that, along West Broad. So I think those curb cuts, I think we should definitely, I understand the desire not to not disturb anything, but I kind of want to echo my colleagues in this, is that I think with the development, we want to make it consistent and make it really feel like it's one full piece rather than a hodgepodge of different development. I had another thing, hold on.
We can come back.
It would be great to see some perspectives too along West Broad to kind of see what that experience is. It's good to see, like, I love the perspectives from Little Falls because that side is so active, but coming at it from West Broad, again, I think we would better understand how that's being activated if we could see something from West Broad so that you see what's across the street, the Harris Teeter development and how that relates to this. And that's it, but I'm very excited and can't wait to see it develop further. So thank you.
Okay, good. Derek?
All right. I deeply respect my colleagues and their comments, but I disagree, I think, tremendously with the way some of you feel about the design. But first, no one asked, like, what's the menu? What kind of beer? That's kind of what I want to know. I mean, but seriously, I mean, Dominion Wine and Beer has been so successful here, and also their ability to adapt. I mean, and many of my colleagues have been to your establishment, not like weekly. I see them there, and I'm there quite a bit, and we love it. And how you guys adapted during the pandemic. I mean, you had a vision before the pandemic. The pandemic happened, you shifted and became one of the most successful businesses on Broad Street in Falls Church. So I have a level of trust in you guys, in what you're going to do. And your vision, although it might not line up with everybody's taste and preferences on the Planning Commission or on City Council, I think you guys have a pulse of your customer base and you know what's going to work. So what I would say about the design, we don't want a homogeneous West Street. I mean, we've got like a strip mall on one side, we've got a strip mall on the other, we've got Harris Teeter. I mean, this is suburban design 101. And now we've got something that comes from a different era, that has a different design. I love the fact that you're preserving what was once there. Now, I know that some of my colleagues and some people in this town know what was once there and want to erase it. Well, what was there? There was prostitution there, there was drug dealing there, and there was homelessness there. So let's just be honest about what was there. But you guys are flipping that all around. You're keeping the structure and creating something that I know is going to be extremely vibrant and is going to bring people from all over the region, just like Dominion Wine and Beer has. So I sort of trust you guys to do something that's going to be innovative and exciting, but it might be a little edgy, because some people are just going to want a standard design that matches what's there, but I don't know if that's going to work, and I don't know if we really want that. I mean, we had that in a lot of the design that is happening in the mixed-use buildings along Broad Street. And we've got Founders Row 1. And it's pretty unsuccessful. And we just gave another development deal to Founders Row 2. And Founders Row 1 and 2 are going to look almost exactly the same. And now we've got a smaller, intimate design that is a little different. But it's probably going to work, and it's probably going to be more successful than anything we've ever done because of the development team and the restaurant team. You guys, again, know what you're doing. So, you know, we can tinker around the edges about parking, about trees, but I would just say, trust this team. Trust them more than other people that have come before us because they've been here. They're committed to our town, and they've been very successful. We can't say that for everyone who comes before the Planning Commission with a development deal. So, again, you can tell I'm big fans of this team and of their restaurant, and I'm so pleased. I mean, we almost had a Wawa there. And we were happy about Wawa. And I thought, Jesus, when the rumors that Wawa was going to come there, I'm like, that's a missed opportunity. That would have been just your standard, I don't even know if it would have been some, but it wouldn't have fit. It wouldn't have been good. But we just were like, oh, God, it's boarded up. It's been vacant for so long. Anything would be better. But now we have something like that's way beyond Wawa that is really going to make this area pop. So, I mean, it's going to raise the rents right across the street instantly. And it's going to raise the rents on the commercial side too, on West. So again, I am happy that my colleagues are giving you some suggestions and ideas to improve, but pause and think about whether these suggestions will really help your business be successful. And if you don't think it will, push back on them, on city staff, and talk to the city council, because I think they trust your judgment. But we all want to see something that fits with all of our tastes and preferences that is going to be tremendously successful. But you've already done that in one part of the city, and I think you're going to do it in another. So that's kind of all I have to say, but thank you, and I'm glad that you guys have this plot of land and plan to do something great with it.
Is funky the style that you're after?
Edgy.
Edgy, okay.
Remember, I studied gentrification.
Okay, well, I'm clean up here, so I have just a few comments, so that's not going to take very long. Yeah, I think you're already making a lot of progress and working through with the staff, and so I would encourage you to continue that and see if we can clean up all, most if not all of those issues. I'm inclined certainly to be pretty flexible on these landscaping waivers. I see that staff is open to having reduced landscaping, so it sounds like there's we're kind of getting close to a meeting of the minds there. I think you have that landscaping buffer that exists between you and the Christian Science Reading Room, and I gather you're asking to keep that just as is. Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. Bike racks, I think you're putting in 6 loops, which is kind of the code. I would encourage you, just a suggestion to, if there's more, room for more of those. Whenever I go to North Side now, it's the few loops that they put in are usually all taken up, and I think you're going to get a lot of bicycle traffic coming to this location, because it's going to be very attractive to a younger crowd. So, I just ask you to think about that. I don't know that you have to do it to get a site plan approval, but it's just my suggestion. To staff, have you looked yet at sewer capacity, whether or not, is there sufficient sewer capacity, or is that still something that has to be looked at?
Our staff in Public Works does look at that. And to my knowledge, they haven't brought any large concerns on that front.
Good.
Yeah.
There was a restaurant there with many hotel rooms with many bathrooms.
I know, but
if you don't mind, there was a comment about that. So we did actually look, and so the existing capacity of the hotel, when functioning, had a a higher discharge rate than the restaurant does.
Okay.
So we're reducing the
I just
capacity.
know for Quinn's, all of a sudden they had to pump up to different watershed and so forth, and that created some issues. I was just kind of hoping that we didn't have anything like that arise here, so that's encouraging. Yeah, the lighting, I guess, we're all kind of concerned about the safety, of the lighting, so I assume it's probably just wanting you all to provide a plan. That may be all that's really needed right now, but for sure, the lighting for safety reasons is something that I believe everybody should be behind. Beyond that, I'm also glad that you are planting trees. I think, to me, more important than a landscaping buffer with grass in it, it's pretty useless, are the planting of trees. So I really appreciate that. The two that are on Little Falls, would they go into those pits that are already there as part of the?
No, there are two planters there, but those
They're
are
like
too
square-
small. Yeah, they would
Yeah.
be more in the lawn around those. They would not be in the brick planters. that
I
are
see.
there.
Would those get used for anything, or?
Probably. I mean, I think one of the comments was because we kind of tried to keep it simple, but we're going to add some more notes about where areas might be refreshed and
Okay.
replanted.
Yeah.
In those, and I think those planters are one of those areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you made some progress just even on your comments tonight, so I'm very pleased at the direction this is going, and I really don't have anything else to suggest, so good luck with your efforts, and hope.
Mr. Chair, if I could just respond to my esteemed colleague down on the other end of the
Go here. and then
dais
we'll-
here.
Okay.
Just to get, everyone knows what I was trying to get across. I mean, look at the Inns of Virginia project, another hotel that a couple blocks away that just went through a facelift, introduced a restaurant, and I think did an excellent job. And I don't know, and they didn't dramatically change the structure. They painted it. They put a mural on the outside. I'm not saying you have to copy what they did, but I'm saying they updated it. They refreshed an older 1960s odd building, brought it up to, a contemporary look, and I think it looks great. And it still preserves the funkiness of an old 1960s hotel to some degree. So that's all I was trying to get at. Not that we need to tear this down, make it look like Harris Teeter, make it look super, modern, but I think there's a way to update it more so than what the renderings are currently showing by keeping it exactly as it is today. And again, design, we can differ on design, but I think that's a great example of a project also with an old hotel that did an excellent job bringing it, updating it, refreshing it, and is now, at least, we'll see how well it does, but it's been pretty successful so far. And I hope you could be just as successful. And I think that's kind of like the aesthetic I would like to see and what I was getting at with my comment. So just to clarify.
Just real quick before we go this way, I forgot to just mention on the parking, I think we've been pretty lenient as a planning commission on allowing, a lower number than what the code requires. So, I think we should be able to work that out. So, Commissioner Comont, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on one thing. The curb cuts was actually also on my list, so thank you for mentioning that, Mr. Krasner. And I noticed that there was a staff comment that says provide ADA compliance, including cross slopes at driveway entrances. And so, are you gonna have to touch them? I mean, I think they should be taken out. I agree with Mr. Krasner on that, but I don't know if it's even possible not to touch them because of ADA. Can you weigh in on that, staff?
I'd have to review the comment again.
That was it. I mean, I just read it. It's
Yeah, I mean, I think my idea with one of the, with the curb cuts along Little Falls, I know that we talked about, was that a little bit for coming in from the parking lot. We would have to, it was very awkward for whether you're loading or if there's handicap that would need to come in. How would they get into the building? Logistically, how would that work? And so that was one of our comments, I know. But as far as, I
think I'm referring to the two, curb cuts that will no longer be used. It sounds like they'll need to provide ADA compliance on those curb cuts at the driveway entrances. Is that, I mean, if they're still driveways, maybe not. I don't know.
If I could, so the comment was, the concern was the two driveway aprons on Little Falls. The transition to the driveway space actually occurs in that walking path. There's a deeper sidewalk on Broad, so the ADA isn't as big a concern, but along Little Falls, what you've got is a situation where you're transitioning from the sidewalk to the slope of the driveway itself. So there are ADA compliant ways of handling that transition, and I don't think they're in place here. That would have to be confirmed, but I think if they're not in compliance, we would want to see some sort of treatment to make sure that that does meet the requirement.
Okay, thanks. Well, I would support the recommendation to remove those. On the bike loops, I just want to point out that it's on Little Falls Street, and Little Falls is right on the W&OD trail, and so I think you can expect cyclists to be coming off of the trail and to this particular use, and so I think it makes a lot of sense to have more bike parking. On that West Broad elevation, again, I'm just wondering, you had a service window on West Broad, now it's gone, but I don't even know if it's possible, but actually providing service on West Broad, having seating in that area, that would be kind of amazing. Maybe it's too loud and busy to be sitting out there, but that would be like a much more dynamic use. Again, I don't know if code would permit that, but that would maybe be another idea to explore. And I just want to say, I hope you're taking our comments as small improvements that you can make. I think this whole commission really wants this project to be successful, and I agree with Mr. Hyra that you should, be thinking about what is good for the business, but that the comments that we're giving you is in that spirit. So yeah, I think we all agree that this is a great use, huge improvement over what is there today.
Okay, Mr. Holler and Mr. Stoddard, anything else you need from us, comment-wise? All right. I'd like to thank the developer team, and good luck with your resubmission. Okay, we are now ready to move on to our second work session item, which is on the CIP. Mr. Stoddard.
Sure, I'm happy to introduce this, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. So this is a work session for you tonight. It's the fall work session to kick off the CIP planning process with the commission. Of course, by charter, you all have a significant role in preparing and recommending the capital improvement program to the city council, who ultimately adopts it as part of their budget. The work session tonight is part of a tradition that started recently, and the idea is that prior to staff doing the heavy lifting to prepare the complete CIP with projects, conceptual designs, financing schemes, to come to you early in the fall to report out to you on what progress staff is making in delivering the already adopted CIP, and also to suggest to you some themes or some broad brush strokes of what staff is preparing for you in the upcoming CIP. You can see the big themes that we've highlighted in the recommendations section on lines 20 through 23, focusing in the upcoming CIP update on public facilities and infrastructure investments, sanitary sewer capacity, which was brought up earlier tonight, as well as the continued push on advancing multimodal transportation. And of course, along with those substantive updates, really the nuts and bolts that go into actually getting it done, and that is aligning staffing and funding resources with the delivery schedule of everything that's in the CIP. Every project is deserving, so we want to make sure we have a way to get it built and working. But with that, I will turn over to Caitlin Sabzi, our grants manager, who will be walking through the presentation tonight.
Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Caitlin Sabzi, CIP Grants Manager. I'm struggling. And I'm joined by Cindy Mester, Community Relations and Legislative Affairs Director. And we are here tonight to talk CIP. We'll be presenting some CIP updates, fiscal year 24 CIP updates by way of the council work plan. And we'll also be kicking off development and planning of the fiscal year 2025 CIP, as Mr. Stoddard mentioned. Lots of materials presented to you guys for review tonight. So I'm going to try and really briefly summarize and touch on all of those in the PowerPoint presentation. Is it this one, Jack?
Yeah, try it. Yeah, I think
Okay.
that should be it. Got to advance it.
Oh, maybe?
Sounds like it hasn't been working too smoothly tonight.
You may have to advance it, Jack.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll have Jack advance for me, sorry. Materials provided tonight include the staff report for Planning Commission, summarizing CIP development process and the schedule, preliminary schedule that we have laid out right now, the quarterly work plan update and memo to council, which was presented in October, which includes some of the existing CIP updates, fiscal year 24 to 25 slate of grant applications for your review, and the small area plan and comp plan report cards. Those were last updated in October of 2022, so staff is working on an update either before or with the proposed FY25 CIP presentation to Planning Commission. The request tonight is just for Planning Commission to review these materials and provide input to Cindy and I and staff on long-term objectives and community priorities for developing fiscal year 25. These first two slides, I'm going to go through this pretty quick because I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for us to discuss and for questions at the end. The first two slides here just summarize what the City Council work plan is and how it works. In developing the October update, we had some newer staff who we realized were asking, like, what are the green boxes? Like, how does it work? So we thought maybe it would be good to include sort of an educational overview of the work plan. And you can go to the next slide. This October update reports progress since the June 2023 update. Also, as some of you are probably aware, the work plan now consolidates the CIP snapshot, which is the quarterly report that we used to report CIP progress in the past. And it uses now that same traffic light method of progress reporting. We just consolidated those into one quarterly report. You can go to the next slide. This, at the June update, the council work plan update, council requested at the following update to see a summary of those snapshot, the traffic light. So this is just a quarterly, overview of changes from June to October updates. The colors here, blue describes projects that are completed. That's not an actual traffic light color, but those are projects that are finished. Green is like on time and active. Yellow is active with some challenges. Red is like a critical issue or challenge or inactive. And then we also added white, which just indicates projects that are not actually active yet, or, new projects that we anticipate, initiating in the future. So the summary of changes from the June update to October illustrates a couple different things for us. I think this is helpful information that council requested. It illustrates changes in project delivery since the June 2023 update, as I mentioned, shows success on completing projects because we have a net increase of 14 blue lights. So that's 14 projects that have been completed since June. But then it also shows challenges in project delivery with the net increase of 4 red lights and the decrease of 16 green lights. Some of those green lights we can assume moved to blue and were completed. Some of them we know were changed to yellow. Some of that summarized here, just some highlights of those changes, which projects were changed to blue or completed. 2 CIP projects, which were changed from previously green to yellow. Those are Broad Street Multimodal and North Washington and Columbia. Both of those are due to funding or schedule delays. And then some red projects include the Rapid Response Team. That is fully funded, but we've had a really hard time recruiting and fully staffing that team. Residential parking update, which is not staffed. And these are not all CIP projects. Some of these are just council priorities that are in the work plan. The Flower Basket Program, which is not funded and delayed. And the Streetscape Design update, which we've had no activity on, so technically is delayed on the work plan schedule. On the next slide, just some highlights from the work plan. Again, these are not CIP related, so I'm just going to go through this really quickly. One notable highlight is the Affordable Housing Program, which is on page 7 of the work plan. That is a new program that's underway. We just had 2 first-time home buyer closings in September of 2023, so good progress to celebrate there. On the next slide, we have, go back one, I'm sorry. We have some updates on CIP projects, Broad Street, Multimodal, all of the transportation, most of it is going to be on page 4 of the work plan. Broad Street Multimodal was just authorized for right-of-way in September, and we also added $1.5 million in federal fundings. That was a federal earmark grant that we had. which addressed the most of 80% of the budget shortfall that we had. It also requires a 20% match, so that's in the council budget amendment that they're considering right now. North Washington and Columbia just was awarded the construction contract, so we're technically in the construction phase now. Anticipate construction starting in the spring of 2024 and through fall of 2024. That was also one where we had a request for additional funding. We got 50% of the shortfall from VDOT. We're requesting the other half from council in the budget amendment. Broad Street Hawks is technically in the construction phase, although we have not broken ground yet. There was a long lead item notice to proceed that was issued in May. The second notice to proceed will be issued this month in November. The second notice to proceed was issued in October, so construction should be starting in November. Also, greening of Lincoln, which is in stormwater on page 6. That's in planning and design right now. There's going to be some public outreach meetings that are planned for winter of 2023 and then also again in the spring of 2024. A lot of good work going on in the stormwater program. We're almost complete. We're almost completely done with all the resilience modeling that we've been doing. Trammell Branch is substantially complete as of this month, and then Harrison Branch, which is one of the other big stormwater projects, just secured I think $4 million in funding through another federal earmark grant. On the next slide, this was presented to council. This is a table that summarizes sort of a historical funding shortfall for CIP projects. In June, at the update, we presented a table that had budget shortfalls and, spoke to just the unprecedented inflation that we're seeing and also disruptions to the supply chain and the cost and budget issues that that's creating. We built on that in this update and added more information. I know it's a lot of information up there. I think this tells us some really important information and gives us some really important historical background on these projects. For example, North Washington and Columbia intersection improvements. We applied for that grant in fiscal year 14. I want to say it was late 2013. So over a decade ago, our initial budget for that was $600,000. Today, our current estimate is over $1.8 million.
Yeah,
So
I think if you add up the current estimate and the original budget, it went up, I think, 100%, if I did the math.
over that, yeah. Yeah, I think that one in particular might even be 200%.
I talk about all of them, if you add them all.
Oh, yes, yeah, for sure. But then this also shows us in the green columns there, the light green, it shows additional funds awarded. So this just acknowledges either in prior year or in the current fiscal year, additional funds that we've added to those projects. Most of that is through grant funding. Some of it, a few of them have gone to council and budget amendment for additional funding requests and been granted. We have in the yellow column on the end, the current shortfalls that we have. Which is great because in the June update, I think we had like 6 projects that had shortfalls. We've gotten down to 3, so we've addressed a lot of those. The 2 that I mentioned that are going to council for consideration in the budget amendment are Broad Street Multimodal and Broad Street Hawks. And then you have the last one, which is the most substantial, which is the community center HVAC replacement. I don't think that's in the budget amendment. I think that's planning to be January, into a future budget amendment. So just to give some information on sort of what we're dealing with right now. And also highlights the strategies that we've been implementing to get additional funds allocated to these projects. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on another slide. The next slide, CIP funding and management, just summarizes some of the challenges. In addition to inflation-related cost increases, we've also seen some other challenges, and, those are just summarized there. The next slide, CIP funding and management strategies. This talks about the strategies that that staff has been implementing to improve project delivery and to address the project funding issues. For project delivery, strategies have included increased outsourcing. We have 2 projects that are currently administered by VDOT. There is an option to request them to to administer future projects for us as well that we'll be considering in fiscal year 25 CIP, planning.
Is that where the two project manager contractors would come from? Would they come from VDOT?
No, so that's a separate request, so, and I think it was granted by council in the budget amendment, or it's in the budget amendment.
In budget reading, and went through first reading, these would be funding for 2 additional contract staff to manage projects in addition to the 2 that VDOT is doing. And one of VDOT, one is done because we just reopened South Oak Street Bridge.
That's true.
Since we did council's update. And we also have Fairfax County doing one of our projects.
That's correct, yeah. So the 2 project manager positions, those are contractor positions, their term, just for the remainder of fiscal year 24, so until July of from now, or whenever budget amendment is adopted, until July of next year. That's something that we are, if it's successful, that maybe that's something we look into replicating in future budget requests as well. For project funding, some funding strategies. Funding strategies which do not require local funds or don't burden the general fund are always prioritized. So I just want to highlight that additional, VDOT requests or other grants. We're getting a lot of opportunities from the, federal earmark programs and community requests now, and or surplus funds from completed CIP projects if we're able to transfer those to another project. Those are always going to be prioritized before we go to council and ask for more money. So the next slide is a table. This has been, this was included in the work plan update, the memo to council. It's been presented by the city manager a couple times as well. This is just a summary of our current CIP workload and funding, but I think the first 2 columns there really tell a story. The first column of active managed CIP projects, and some of those include all active ongoing projects. Some of them are not managed by city staff, as Cindy mentioned, but those are 41. Those projects total 41 currently across all CIP programs. Obviously, the biggest one usually is transportation. We have 19 there. And then the second column is new and future CIP projects that we have in the adopted CIP from last year, and that's FY 24 through 33. So for that 10-year window, we have 43 projects adopted currently. So one of the goals or issues that we've also identified is balancing the CIP, making sure that yes, we are addressing resourcing the CIP so that we can ensure that we deliver the projects that we've committed, the 41 projects that we've committed to making, but also making sure that for long-range planning purposes, we are adding projects in the out year and balancing that a little bit better. Also, I should say those 41 projects are currently managed. We have the equivalent of 6 full-time project managers. I think it's 4 full-time positions and 2 part-time. And so that's also one of the, that's, I think, contributed a lot to the request for the 2 project manager contractors, and will be a big part of our conversations in developing fiscal year 25 CIP. The next slide, and I'm almost done. These are just some key takeaways for Planning Commission tonight. Just summarizes everything that was in the materials presented for you tonight. The snapshot summary of changes, like I said, I think that demonstrates kind of our ongoing challenges and trends, project management resources and staffing, vacancies. That's been a big one for project delivery. Funding challenges. We've had some changes in the last couple of years in like the grant world that we need to address. Second, funding shortfall history. That history of all of the funding, the CIP project funding shortfalls, does show and acknowledge the leveraging of grant funds that we're currently doing, and opportunities that, we're using to mitigate those cost increases. So I feel like we can celebrate that. CIP workload overview shows the 41 ongoing projects that staff are currently managing or are active. And I feel like I already touched on that. So we can go to the next slide. Some highlights for the development and planning of fiscal year '25 CIP, which we have initiated in the last few weeks. Internally, staff has started the development of the CIP process. So some things that we've identified early already that we want to focus on. And, you know, Mr. Stoddard touched on these. It's in the recommendation in our staff report tonight. Right sizing and right resourcing the CIP. So resources is going to be a big theme. This is an odd numbered year, FY25 is, so that means that we already have a limited amount of new projects to, you know, that we're considering historically. So we're prioritizing funding requests for active projects that have shortfalls, or new projects, proposals that are being added in the sort of 7 to 10 year outlook, so that we can prioritize that right resourcing of ongoing projects now, and evaluating CIP requirements and resources needed to just improve overall delivery. I feel like, you know, we did focus on this last year. I presented the Planning Commission with some information on this last year, but I feel like this year, we're still facing the same challenges. We're still sort of in the same place. We've had some improvements, but we're still struggling with the same issues. So I think this year we'll really be doubling down on that. For priorities, as far as some programs that in the CIP that we've identified, and these are preliminary, and it's not to say that the other programs are not a priority, but I think some places where we've identified that there will be a lot of interest, either from the public or from Planning Commission and Council, and just, you know, more that we need to build on are public facilities. I think some public facilities projects that we have right now, the the community center HVAC replacement, also the generator upgrades, security upgrades are in public facilities as well, or maybe public safety. Just, you know, public buildings and facilities and upgrading those. Sanitary sewers, definitely a big one. Capacity upgrades needed for long-term infrastructure investments and development. And then the third is multimodal or ped bike improvements and safety. We have the Bike Master Plan update underway, multiple planning grants and for multimodal accessibility and connectivity, and some pending grant applications. These are all on the slate of grant applications that was attached for multimodal improvements, a trail, the Cavalier Park trail improvements, a couple of those projects that are pending currently, and a $3 million grant request that we also still have pending, not approved yet, just for the multimodal program for general improvement projects. Some goals, citywide or whole city programming and funding approach. That's one thing that is important to me personally. I feel like, you know, the funding in transportation traditionally has been a lot, vast. And, you know, last year I was really proud of, and I thought we really successfully delivered a plan to get a lot more funding into the stormwater program. And we've done that, and we have a lot of ongoing active projects or projects that are coming online in the next year. And so I feel really good about that. I'd like to see that expanded to other programs in the CIP that traditionally have not received as much funding. And I think that we're in a good place to do that. We've expanded the grant management capacity in our organization. We'll be adding another position, and so I feel like that will help us a lot. We're using consultants more to write applications for us, or even just bring us grant opportunities and say this is a good fit for the city. So I'd like to continue that work with other programs, like I mentioned. Continue long-range investment planning, like I said, just balancing what we're trying to currently deliver, and making sure that, you know, we're keeping the pipeline of projects going to keep up with all of the other investments, and continue the maintenance and renewal of our infrastructure to support those investments. And then just general process improvements that Internal process improvements which help help the CIP delivery in areas of grant management, project management, budget development, reporting, all of that. I think that will help us deliver the CIP overall as well. I think that's all from me, so I'm ready to, hopefully that wasn't too long.
Our turn to give you some feedback.
Yes, exactly. And also, if you want to, Jack, bring up the schedule, I just want to touch on that really quickly for your awareness. We'll be back in Planning Commission. Yeah, it's on page 4 of the staff report, thanks. We'll be back to Planning Commission January 17th is the date that we have scheduled now for the proposed FY25 CIP work session that we do with Planning Commission, and then we'll come back again in February for the public hearing and recommendation of the FY25 CIP. I think that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Somebody like to jump in to start? Go ahead, Sharon.
So I want to thank you. I was looking specifically at the staffing. I'm glad you're paying attention to really focusing on how can we look at how to staff this massive workload. I mean, I think it's massive right now for 6 people. And so I'm glad that you're looking at it. And I think one of the things that I think will be helpful would be to kind of show a schedule of all the projects currently, and then those that are kind of trending in the pipeline, align that with staff capacity and funding. And I don't know if grant funding sunsets at a certain time, but it would be good to kind of see how and when that grant money sunsets to make sure that we are staffing those projects appropriately, to stay on the contractors so that they can, their performance issues, we're on top of them so that they're not impacting the schedule. It's hard to know what kind of issues when just looking at a very high level. And being in construction management, I know that if you're not on top of it, it's really hard to catch back up later. So I think staffing is going to be the key to that solution. One thing that I did want to note is on the priorities, we just looked at the CEAP, and we were also looking at, like, how is that going to be rolled out in the next 6 months? How is that going to be rolled out in 2024? And I know that we're talking about fiscal year 25, but I think that also needs to be kind of looked at, those projects as well, because those are a quick rollout and a quick turnaround that I think may slip through the cracks of the fiscal year 24 planning and into 25. Let's see. I had other questions just more specifically that were kind of in the SAP report, but I was glad to see that you're addressing the updates to the sanitary sewer, those kinds of studies, that those will be taken care of. I was curious about the rapid response team and the challenges in finding people to fill those roles, and whether or not we've looked at adjacent jurisdictions and what their packages, what their employment packages look like, and how we compare to that. If we're attractive compared to our adjacent jurisdictions, it's hard to know.
Yeah. I don't, so I'm not, that's really an HR sort of, item, but I know that the recruitment has been very difficult. It's not just for the rapid response team, it's also in our DPW ops. We have I think we have 30% vacancies in there right now.
And Caitlin, would you like me to take that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Taking off where Caitlin just said, it is a large vacancy in Public Works, and we've had that through COVID, and it's still continuing. That 30% translates to 15 folks, and when that is predominantly your field crew, there are some of our engineers as well. One of the 3 rapid response has been hired. So it's been, we've looked regionally. We've actually done 2 salary market adjustments in the last year to up it because we were losing folks to other localities. And we're more comparable now, but salary is still an issue region-wide. Finding folks with CDLs has been a real challenge in the region, and so a lot of the localities, including us, are now hiring and training and helping people get their CDL certification and sort of offering a bonus for that, but then that does delay the actual work delivery because you got to get, the skill set up to drive the vehicles. So it's been a big challenge in public works, and we had police, but now it looks like we got police back in shape, but we're still struggling on the public works side. So HR has been going out for career fairs. We've been doing, the regional salary comparison. Look, we're really good on benefits, but unfortunately, sometimes a young person getting into the field isn't so excited about our retirement, even though I might be. But so that's just a little bit of where we've been working, but. And a lot of times we hire somebody and they've come from the private sector, and then they get a offer back from their former employer to counter and get them back, and we can't match it.
Okay.
I just also wanted to add really quick to your point about the 41 projects. I should have mentioned this earlier, but, the size and complexity of those projects really vary a lot, right? So it's not necessarily that every one of those project managers is managing, because I think if you do the math, it's over 6 projects per project manager. And so not every one of those project managers is doing 6 Park Avenue Great Streets, right? Some of them are going to be a lot less. But you're correct that it is still a huge workload and a lot of money. We have $67 million in those active ongoing projects right now, and I think over $153 million for the 6-year CIP last year, plus another, $180 million for the 4-year window after that. So it's a lot. And I appreciate your point about aligning that with the funding too, because that's really important. And I feel like sometimes that's a point that is lost sometimes when we talk with, project managers and engineering and construction. There's also, funding and grant constraints that we have to consider. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. This is a really great report. Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
I have a few. Thank you for the presentation. It's just a huge amount of work. So I'm always amazed that our staff is able to execute so much of this very ambitious council work plan and so well. I was curious about the temp positions that you're looking to hire for, because it's already November and I guess they are going only through June. So how quickly do you think you're able to hire for those positions, and are people really willing to come and work for 5-6 months? Have you had experience with that in the past and it's worked out?
We're not going to actually hire temp as employees.
I
We're
see.
going to use our on-call contractors that we already
Okay,
have on
great.
contract.
Okay.
So we
Much
can
easier.
expedite
And so they're already
quickly.
maybe a little read in on the projects or working on them? Or
Well, we need the
Possibly.
budget approved by council, and then we'll be able to. But the contracts exist. They have
Yeah.
done work with us before. They know our general.
Also, we have done that in the past successfully with, I think, some stormwater engineers who, were consultants who came to work for the city in
Okay.
temporary positions.
So the contractor could use multiple people, but it would be the equivalent of two people.
The funding, although we will certainly pursue, like, trying to have a continuity of 2 people, because once they learn our process and
Right.
system, it's less
Yeah,
oversight
I'd
and
imagine there's
management.
a pretty steep learning curve
Yeah.
and a lot of time investment in getting up to speed.
Yeah, but we have a lot of good on-call contractors already that know us from these other projects. Just we'd bring them in as a project
Great.
manager.
Well, I fully support the request. Not that it's up to me.
It was favorably passed on first reading, and I didn't
Terrific.
sense any concerns from council, so I do believe we'll
Yeah.
see approval in November.
I really appreciated the new table. I guess that was the council request. The quarterly running estimate is really interesting. I'd imagine this varies a lot from quarter to quarter.
Sure.
We got a lot done last, and also on that same point, like not all these projects are created equal, right? I mean, in terms of staff time or just the funding or just the length of time. So I don't know if there's some way to like make a bubble chart, like the size of the project, or I don't know what effort. I would love to be able to see that, because this 14 number, is it like 12 tiny projects and 2 really huge ones, or, and I don't know if there's a way to track this quarter to quarter and have some sort of like moving average that we would watch as a metric for kind of how the health of the delivery of the CIP projects. Do you know what I mean? Because it's variable from quarter to quarter. This quarter, and I don't know. I'm not a math person, but I do love data, and so I feel like you could come up with some kind of calculation here. Maybe Mr. Schotter could help with this. That would be some sort of metric to keep an eye on.
I did. In the slides, I did try to summarize the CIP changes because I knew that those would probably be of the most interest. I believe the only 2 CIP projects that changed colors were those ones that I highlighted that changed from green to yellow.
Oh, okay. I'm talking about the completed projects too.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know that, but I'm saying I tried to capture like what pertains specifically to CIP, because you're right, some of those things that were moved to blue are just council priorities or other initiatives that are in the work plan and not necessarily CIP. I don't
Oh,
think,
I see what you're saying.
yeah, I don't think any CIP projects were changed to blue in that update.
Well, this might be a good thing to do for CIP.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will be next time. And when we created this the first time and we got 2 quarters, okay, now we got to get to the next quarter. How are we going to average it? So we started playing with it, but.
Yeah, but just
Gotta-
thinking about that
haven't quite
approach,
figured
and recognizing that not all of these projects are created equal, and completing one really huge project is a big deal. So anyway, but more data. I was curious about, I think you were both here for the Alexandria presentation, and she talked about how they have particular buckets of money in the CIP for things like safe routes to school, complete streets, project planning. I mean, I probably should know this, but do we have a similar kind of like earmarking in our CIP, or is it really project-based? And what did you think of that approach? Because it seems like it could be helpful to have.
I may have missed the buckets part. I actually have been talking with Hillary. I met with her a few weeks ago or months ago about CIP engagement. We didn't really talk a whole lot of funding. I was interested, and I talked to her in the hall after tonight about her safe routes to school money, because in the past, my understanding of safe routes to school is that it's very small, sort of nominal amounts of grant awards, and they're usually awarded to schools. I admit I haven't looked at it in the last couple of years. But what was the question is if we have.
And I think we had some, for like the project management, we have a grant development project line item now that we can charge staff to as we're writing grants and doing project development. And we've been talking about expanding that, because her points about applying, and we saw it on the one that we did in FY14, and money's now 1.8 versus 600. Besides the money being a problem, the community messaging and understanding, I mean, we experienced the same thing that
You've
she
got
was
the
describing.
council work plan categories, small town character, economic vitality, safe and complete streets, those categories provide a little bit more detail. It might be something to think about.
We sort of historically have gone broader, so like the multimodal category and programs that we have would fit your complete streets and your safe routes to school and stuff, which allows us have projects under that program category, and then it's administratively and budget easy, because if it's all in that pot, we can move between them without going back to council and doing 2 readings and the full ordinance thing. So it makes it a little easier. But it was interesting to see how she targeted specifics. We do have neighborhood traffic calming as a separate project, and we have sidewalks as a separate project. So we have something similar, but not quite the ways.
Does that? I still don't really understand the question. So does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I may have misunderstood exactly what she was presenting too, but I was just.
She did mention a CIP development bucket of money that they use for developing and planning new projects, whether that's having a consultant do a concept or a study, anything like that. We do have one of those. It's called CIP Project Development. It's in the CIP notebook. I think last year it was $100,000 or $200,000 appropriation. We usually do at least $100,000 a year, and we do have staff charged to that. Right now, what it's primarily used for is staff charging for grant applications and, development of project proposals, or just projects that are already awarded, but we don't have the funding yet. It's in a future year if we need to do public engagement or anything like that, we charge to that account. We have talked in the past about using that more for consultants as well. And that's one of those things that I mentioned, the changes in the grant world, is that application processes are getting a lot more complex now and a lot more demanding, honestly, of like what they need for the app, for even like a pre-application. They want like right-of-way studies. And we don't have, the City of Falls Church doesn't have a right-of-way department like Fairfax County does. We don't have people on staff who can, do that sort of, report and study. So that's something we've looked into, is using that money more and maybe even increasing the budget amount so that we can address some of those changes that,
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. And I asked her in the hallway, I was like, tell me about your safe routes to school, because I don't remember it being very much, like, how are you using it? So I'm interested in those
Okay.
as well, yeah.
Great. Last thing, just want to echo Ms. Friedlander's concern about the Community Energy Action Plan funding and how we're going to be implementing that. I think there was a lot of great ideas in that plan, but there's not a lot of,
Money.
yeah, not a lot of money beyond the 50,000, which is not going to go.
That's for a pilot, so.
Yes. So just, I want to keep that front and center, how we're going to, if there's a way to use the CIP for supporting that line of work. I mean, it does feel like an investment to me, but,
Some will be CIP and some will be operating. The current budget amendment in front of council has some money so that we can do, for example, the engineering analysis for the solar rooftops, because right now they're in the CIP with Mr. Young's rough estimate with some good local
Unfunded.
input. Well, the solar are unfunded. Hopefully, the money in this budget will help us refine that to find out which of the 8 buildings can we do? Do they have the right structural and age and in the right direction for sun and not too many trees? So hopefully, when we go into the next we're in the next CIP development, we'll have the information that can help us assess, is it the right dollar amount?
Yeah.
and
That was on my
whether we
list
fund
too,
it.
but one thing I was going to add to that real quick was just, it would be really good on that analysis, because I think he had like $800,000. That's, looks like a large amount of money. But there's always money coming back to the city, although albeit through operating budgets through, in the future. But it would be good to show, hey, we're going to spend $800,000 potentially, but we're going to get back all of this other money so that it's not, net that amount.
Yeah, so it is 8,000. We did show the net of the rebate, because we can get the tax rebates for
The
30%.
30% direct pay, right.
But when we do a budgeting construct, that's reimbursable, so we got to budget the right amount and get it back. So we're trying to message better and we do show the operating savings, because that is a payback.
Lower utility bills over time.
yes.
Yeah. Because I think it's really helpful to have that against the CIP amount.
And it's in the write-up, it's just when you see the budget number, because we got a budget at the upfront cost, then it looks bigger. But we need to do a deeper dive on all 8 of those facilities, which include the schools, ones that we can actually execute on.
I'll just add that I think that your point, Ms. Comont, also speaks to the whole citywide funding and programming approach that I mentioned. That's why that's, I think, really important to focus on. This last year, we got a grant for electric vehicle chargers and fleet for DPW. I think the police department has a grant for EVs as well. So I think just expanding our grant funding sources and opportunities to programs like environmental, so.
And we have asked, I've sent out with Caitlin's help, we've sent out to request all departments to work on the CIP projects during the month of November. I think they're already scheduled. We'll be meeting with all the departments. And then, of course, those departments will ping their associated boards and commissions. So for a lot of things you talked about this evening in the SEEP, it'll be ESC and CACT for sure. That will be
Great.
pinging, and then Housing Commission, HSAC for some of those probably more operating, but assistance to the community for the equity and lower income.
Great, thank you.
All set? Okay, who would like to go next? I'm happy to go. Derek?
I'll be pretty quick. I kind of say the same thing every year when we get to this, so you know what I'm going to say. But, you know, I know you presented that there are affordable housing goals and funds, but it's not part of the CIP, right? And I just, I talked about at the last Planning Commission meeting that we are going to have somebody, and I think Paul hopefully scheduled this soon, with a Planning Commissioner chair from Charlottesville. Charlottesville is about 50,000. We're about, I guess, what, 25,000, but they've 15. Yeah, we're small. I thought we were 25. We're growing. But anyway, they're putting 10 million a year towards affordable housing. And I asked this Planning Commissioner, and he'll tell us more how he did it, but he basically said, we didn't get money until we put affordable housing in the CIP, because the CIP is really a planning document. That's all it is. It's just a long-term planning document. So if we think affordable housing is part of our long-term plans, we want to put that in the CIP. So we really should have all our affordable housing goals and funding that we get, or that we think we're going to get with mixed-use development over time, or in other funding streams, and into that CIP. And then we're going to show that we can't fund it because we don't have the money, but then we utilize that as leverage to do maybe a bond referendum. And there are many things that we want to do that we have a budget shortfall on, but the way you do it, and the way Charlottesville did it, was a bond referendum. A lot of cities do it that way. It may not pass, but if we don't even put affordable housing in the CIP, we're never going to do a bond referendum, and we're never going to have the money that we need to actually execute it. So I'm going to say it again, and every year this thing comes before us, I'm going to say, please put affordable housing in the CIP. Charlottesville used to not have it. Charlottesville used to do exactly what we do now. But now they have money, and it started with putting affordable housing in the CIP. Same with Alexandria. They have it in the CIP. We need to have it. All right, I'm done on the affordable housing side. But the other thing is, we just did an East End small area plan. We had in that plan anti-displacement money, or we wanted to do funding for anti-small business displacement. That should be in the CIP. Where are we going to get those funds to do that? We're just going to have it in the plan, and we're going to constantly say, we have no money for that. And we're going to say, oh, the developer, whoever develops the Eden Center, should pay for it. Well, no, we should pay for it. We're the ones that created the plan. We're the ones that are greenlighting the redevelopment. We're the ones that promise people and small businesses on the East End that we would come up with funding. But it's long-term funding, right? This is not immediate. It's not next year or the year after. That development is going to happen maybe in 5 years or 10 years. So that's long-term planning. Can we have small business anti-displacement funding in the CIP? I mean, I think it's strange and weird that we say we want to do things and we create these goals and we have these ambitions, but then when we look at the CIP, there are only certain goals, certain ambitions in that CIP. That's our real long-term priorities: greening, infrastructure. Where's housing and where's the other things? Please, it's not that hard. I mean, I'm not asking you to do a lot other than put another line in the spreadsheet. It's in, click return, put that line in, and that's it. Just to show that this is our priority. So I often ask, and we have a city council member, the city council to make it a priority, ask us to make it a priority. But I'm asking staff, like literally put another line in the Excel spreadsheet. Is it that hard? And then you can say, Derek, we put it in here and we still can't get the funding for it. We keep asking city council. But at least city council and all of us will see that that's actually in there. So I'm sorry to get so upset so late at night. I'm actually in a great mood. I just watched my son play the best football game he has ever played tonight. He got a sack. They lost, though, but they played great. But it does get frustrating, and you have to understand that. Like, I keep saying these things over and over again, and they don't get done. So that's frustrating. So please, hit return on the Excel spreadsheet for me and put affordable housing in the CIP, and hit another return and put anti-displacement funding. It's 2 lines. That's it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
I just want to say, there is a line in the spreadsheet currently. It's in Chapter 3 of the CIP notebook, and on one spreadsheet, there is one line that says affordable housing, and then it says, see separate affordable housing fund and operating budget. So I just want to, I think it's kind of funny. I'm not trying to be, I'm in agreement with you.
That works, doesn't it?
It's, the way that the CIP funding works, it's multiple different funds. We have the general fund, we have the utility fund, we have the special transportation fund. The ins and outs of how all of those funds work and what is feasible as far as adding new programs and new funding to the CIP, that's a financial sort of policy decision that I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, and I can't answer that. It's something that I'm interested in, too. I'm interested in adding, I've never told anyone this before, so I'm going to get in trouble, but I'm interested in adding an economic development program because we have some things in transportation right now that don't qualify for transportation funding. I have no idea if that's feasible or not either, but I just wanted to make those comments that I think that staff is on board with that. So, thanks.
Yep, and so I appreciate the commitment to those because those are important issue in the budget as a whole, whether we're talking CIP or operating, is the execution tool on the vision and all the adopted plans. We'll have to get into the nuances of accounting and which pot does it go into, but your point about the CIP is that it's the visible long-range planning. So we'll take these comments and see how we can move it forward, and that's why we're here now and not in February when we deliver you the CIP. So thank you.
Thank you. I meant to say that, too.
Thank you. And I can't wait for February.
Okay, I'm going to take a turn here, I think. And some of the things I've crossed off my list here. I like that you combined the council work plan with the CIP kind of traffic light status report. When you come back in January, though, will it be the traditional CIP report that Cindy has always brought to us in the past? In other words, it won't be the integration of the council work plan and the CIP?
No, we've basically phased out the CIP snapshot report, and that is always, since they were both on a quarterly basis,
Yeah.
it just seemed like a lot of extra work.
Right.
So we will be doing another council work plan update in
Okay, so this is the
February.
new format then, basically?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, well, I think that's good.
Okay, was there something that, obviously, when we did the CIP, you got more projects, but is there something in particular you're missing from the combined? Because the direction to us is to keep it combined.
I haven't
but-
done a crosswalk yet to see if something got missed, but I really see the value of integrating with council's overall work plan with the CIP. That just makes eminently good sense, but I think you were just touching on the one thing that might be a concern, and that's, do we lose some detail? Because you used to have a lot of detail in your report out to us.
Yeah, it doesn't have the whole 41. We can look at it, but it is combined.
Yeah.
And part of it is to address the workload, right? Because a lot of the same staff are doing council's initiatives, whether they're in the CIP or not, because it is the budget as a whole that we're executing. So it allows us to help look at the workload holistically. But,
Good.
the majority of the big CIP projects are in there.
Yeah.
The
ones-
We can reassess if there's anything major missing to make sure we flag it.
Yeah.
And I do try to highlight, like in presentations to council and to planning commission, like I touched on a couple stormwater projects tonight that were not in the work plan update. Like if there's something that I know that, is a CIP project that's not in the work plan, but that I feel like, updates are important to present, then I usually include those.
Because we'll vote on the entire CIP, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
you'll have all of it, yeah.
Just an overall comment. I think there is something underway to relook at the city's website and make it more accessible to the public. Is that
Yes.
right? It'd be great if the CIP could be included in that. I would almost like to see it get out of technical language, maybe not even use the word or the term CIP. I saw this down in Savannah when I was down there, and they had a really good ability for the public to go in and find out what the long-term capital projects were. Very accessible, nice photos of what the projects were, and it really gave the public a good sense of how many things were happening, how many things that the city was doing that was spending money on. So I'll just throw that out as a thought. As long as the work is underway, it'd be great if you could figure out some way to work into that, the CIP outreach to the public.
That's helpful, and we can look at Savannah. We're just now starting that process with the Director of Communications, and there is an intention to do some stakeholder community survey for feedback too, and we'll take this now, but hopefully there'll be other times for you all to.
I think when it comes to the
have
public,
input.
the less technical, the better. More
Yeah, with
pictures, the
our-
better.
With our current CIP pages, we often work on that because who writes it is the one that knows the project, and they're usually the engineer or the project manager, so.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to not have that skill set because that's what we need in the field, but they're not always good for writing for the website.
Those are different skill sets, right? I'll also add my support for the projects that are integrated into the Community Energy Action Plan. The community HVAC, I know it's coming up in the surplus discussion with council. And the 2.7 million, am I correct that the 1 million is ARPA funding out of that total of 3.7 for that project?
Yeah, the 2.7 is the funding gap, but we
Yeah.
already have $1 million of ARPA money into the HVAC system.
Right.
It was not in the current budget amendment, it'll be in the one in January.
Correct.
Because they need to complete the studies on the geothermal.
Right.
That 2.7 is a real ROM, and we need to get past a rough order of magnitude. So the wells are drilled, and now they're doing the analysis, so,
That's another one where savings would be helpful.
yeah.
Again, those savings are going to occur over a very long period of time, and I know it's not easy to calculate it, but I think unless we put in those savings, it's going to be a much harder ask for people on council to approve those projects.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know when we did the first briefing to them and got the okay to proceed with researching geothermal, we did do the payback.
Yeah, well,
You
it's
never
challenge-
get to 100% and it takes a very long time, but that's an important storytelling piece.
Yeah, well, it's challenging too because the upfront is one-time funds, but yet the savings are in the operating budget out over a number of years. And so, trying to connect those two is not going to be easy, but I think it's really important to make progress on the CEAP. Let's see, what else did I have here that we didn't cover? HVAC, did that one. I think that's all I had at this point. So, does anybody else have any? Mr. Krasner, do you have?
I mean, I don't have too much more to add. I mean, I'll piggyback on what Tim said about, having an accessible way for the public to know. I mean, I'm a visual person. I mean, I feel like it would be great if we had a map, working with our GIS kind of capability to have a map where people could, see what's in the pipeline. I think, people see things happen in the city and they, don't know what it is, what it's about. I'm thinking of even little things, just little things that popped up over the last year or two, like crosswalk improvements and bump outs, like at my little corner at West and Lincoln, that I don't think I'm sure it was in the CIP somewhere. I don't know. I didn't even realize that was happening, but it was good that it did. But people see that stuff and they wonder, where is this coming from? What project was this for? What's this about? And to have something that was visual, I mean, it's one thing. The snapshot is good, and if you can, you can search through it and find it. But I think having a map so people could kind of zoom into their neighborhood, look at other parts of the city, and and see, okay, this is what this is. This is what's planned to happen here. I just think it would be great. I don't know, and maybe take some time to do that to kind of take the spreadsheet but maybe not if you have if you have addresses and locations in there. But that's just a suggestion. Otherwise, I mean, I always appreciate the heads up that we get in the fall. This year again, it's I didn't see any major surprises in here, but I mean, I was happy to still see the greening of Lincoln. That looks like that's continuing to move forward, and along with some other things that I've been just personally following. So, but I think my colleagues hit on some of the bigger picture stuff.
I think Brent reminded me, I wanted to say something about the Gresham Place traffic signal, which I think is part of the Smart Streets program. Is that where
Falls
you had
Church
it?
Smart City program.
Smart City, yeah. So got a lot of folks over in that area, would love to see some kind of progress made on that on an interim basis. If that could be done through the Smart City program, that would be great.
It can be, and it's already started. We've done the fiber testing out in the field of all our existing lights, including down at Gresham, and what would be needed to make the changes. And our project manager for Falls Church Smart City, which is an outsourced to VTTI, another way to move that project along, has already met with Arlington and our Public Works Director.
I'm certainly willing to serve as a funnel to get information back to the Gresham Place community and the Falls Plaza, because all of their patrons are affected by that,
Yeah,
by that as well.
Just happened the last couple of weeks, so it started, a little bit more to go. The long-term solution, though, is in the North Washington POA CIP project. but we
Long-term is
know
like
that's
7 years, though.
FY26. So, yeah, so we are working on something interim.
Okay. Any other final comments on CIP before we close that out and thank Ms. Upsey for the last time? Oh, you
Thanks.
have one?
I'll just add, we do have a CIP map. It's called the CIP Story Map. Clearly, it's not very easy to find on the
Story
website.
map, I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah,
It wasn't in your PowerPoint.
that's true, it wasn't. But we've also increased support to DPW recently for the CIP project web pages and just, helping the project managers get less technical and, easier for the public to digest. And definitely CIP Story Map, I'm putting that on my list
Great.
to work on.
Strongly encourage it.
Can I just say also where the project is happening, like a sign with a QR code, a summary of what the project is? That would be really helpful. People are walking by these areas or driving by them or live near them. And, if there's a simple summary of the project that's being created, bringing that to the physical environment around where the project is occurring would be helpful.
Okay. I think we accomplished our mission here on CIP. That leaves the, let's see. Now I guess we go to zoning cleanup items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is your last work session item of the night. These are zoning cleanup items. So one thing I'm hoping that we can get into the habit of with our zoning updates is getting into sort of an annual cycle of sort of a long step and a short step. So long step, take on a big sort of meaty topic and work it with the community and get that to resolution, and then follow that up with a short step where we've got this sort of backlog of things, whether there are clerical errors in the code or typographical errors, or there are code references that got missed in previous cleanups, that we would use the short step to clean up a host of these things. This was previewed with you as part of your director's report in your last meeting, and now council has granted first reading to it, and so it's before you for work session tonight. I'm going to let Mr. Jack Traynor walk you through the proposed changes, but just to highlight the schedule, because these are categorized as cleanup items, the schedule is to hold a work session with you all tonight, and then hold a public hearing with you at your next meeting on November 15th, so that it could get back to council for their final consideration at one of their December meetings. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Traynor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Stoddard, and thank you, Chair and Planning Commission, for bearing with us as we get to the main event tonight, which is a work session on zoning ordinance cleanup items. These are items that the Planning Commission the planning staff and zoning staff have identified as items in the zoning ordinance that are in need of adjustment because they're out of date with the state code, or there's ambiguity that's been identified over the course of administering the ordinance, or there's just kind of general errors. As Mr. Stoddard mentioned, it's good practice to update the zoning ordinance and review it time to time. So this will be a more regular practice, something that we'll bring before you with more frequency. In addition to the items included here tonight, staff's also identified a separate list of items that are in need of adjustment. These are a little more complex, and they're included as their own separate attachment, and will come back before you sometime in the future. But in terms of the items being considered tonight, I'll just run through them quickly. There's 6 of them. The first one is around advertising requirements for SUP and zoning applications. Our code is out of date with what the state code prescribes, such as the minimum number of days that a newspaper ad needs to run, or notices to adjacent or affected properties for a rezoning application. So the fix is really just amending our code with state code's language. The second is around variance criteria. Similar story, the city's code around variance criteria is out of date and will just be updated to reflect what the state language is. The third item is around official design zoning district regulations. Today, the OD district has 2 sub-areas, the municipal area where the Stratford site plan falls into earlier, that we saw earlier tonight. And then there's also the historic area where the Falls Church Episcopalian Church is in, and the kind of south of West Broad Street, it's that kind of triangle area. That area particularly has a listed principal use of any permitted T1 use. And so to prevent the uses in the OD district changing when the T1 updates take effect early next year, the proposed fix here is to strike reference to T1 and instead list out what those uses are today in the T1 district, and so those won't change when the T1 updates take effect. The fourth item is regarding front yard, the setbacks, the footnote 11 in the height and lot table in the zoning ordinance. This footnote 11 was updated during a previous update, and as a result, kind of muddled the syntax of the sentence. So the interpretation of how the front yard setback is measured for commercial properties with frontage on Broad and Washington has been misinterpreted from time to time, and so what the zoning administrator flagged was just moving that last line, which reads, "Distance shall be measured from the face of the curb to the nearest point of the face of the building to the beginning of the footnote," so that's clear. The fifth item is regarding the street side yard and interior side yard terms. These are outdated terms that whose definitions have been deleted from the zoning ordinance. They no longer apply. What they referred to previously was regarding corner lots where you had a front yard and a street side yard. But again, since these definitions have been erased, the city now recognizes for corner lots 2 front yards and 2 just normal side yards. And so these terms will be just removed from the zoning ordinance, again, because they're outdated and no longer apply. And the last cleanup item is regarding waiver provisions and landscape requirements codification errors in section 48-1184, where again, a previous update to the zoning ordinance kind of scrambled something structurally, and so there's just kind of erroneous reference to different structural terms. So this is that maybe sounds a little more dramatic than what's actually going on here. We're just replacing section with division and subsection with section to more accurately reference the order that it now falls into in the zoning ordinance. So some further analysis, is covered in the staff report, including in this. We're looking at the council staff report here from their first reading. The official design intent is listed here. And then, one more time, going to the timing that Mr. Stoddard just went over. Tonight, November 1st, you're having your work session. As scheduled right now is a public hearing for your next November meeting on the 15th followed by council's second reading and final consideration on December 11th. So I'll turn it to you, Mr. Chair, for any questions.
Okay, anyone have questions, comments?
I had a couple.
Mr. Krasner?
Well, I emailed, I don't know if you were on it, Mr. Trainer. I emailed Keita Aruzzi and Mr. Stoddard about the issue with the variance update. It was not all the way up to date. It was amended again in 2018 after 2015 to include granting variances for people with a disability. And so that, the point is to be up to date with state code, well, we should get all the way up to date, not stop at the second most recent update. So sounds like that was a simple miss, and they'll add that. So that should be added in the draft that we see next time.
Got it, yeah, thanks.
Obviously, it's like a can of worms when you start looking at our ordinance because there's so many anachronistic, old, weird things in there. I think this is a good first start capturing. I like your list of future updates or future things to look at that are a little more complicated. One thing that I don't like in our ordinance that I see has been unevenly applied, width of driveways. Right now, our ordinance has this weird provision that limits the width of a driveway for any single-family detached house to 14 feet. But when you actually see how it's been applied, there's this other weird language that essentially anyone who builds a house with a two-car garage gets like a waiver from that. Like the zoning administrator just found a way to not enforce that. But then some people kind of did enforce it. And sometimes what you wind up seeing in town are newer infill is someone who, the house gets built with like a weird neck-down driveway, for it to serve a two-car garage, and then later the person goes back in and just fills it in anyway and widens it back out. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know the history of that. It's weird. It's got weird provisions in there. It's not enforced, at least not that I could see. And so I would add that to the list of maybe future things. It's probably more complicated than just a fix, like a correction, but it's something that I've always wondered about. It makes no sense to me. If we're going to allow people to build a two-car garage, then why would we require them to neck down the driveway? It's just not enforced. If we wanted to be strict about it for other reasons for not having as wide curb cuts, but we just don't enforce it. So it becomes like an equity problem when some people think they're following the rules and other people don't, and you wonder how did they build that? So anyway, that was just a suggestion I had.
Yeah, if I could, I could sort of ramble off sort of public purposes for trying to keep that entrance into the driveway narrow. You want to sort of keep as much curb space as you can so that it's generally shared public space. Keeping the driveway narrow, you're reducing impervious surface. You're giving more room for trees. You're reducing the space where a pedestrian might be crossing a driveway. So there are a lot of reasons to try and sort of keep those as tight as they can be to keep them functional. You're right on the 14-foot width requirement that exists inside the zoning ordinance, but then if someone's not actually coming in for a zoning approval, did anyone sort of stop to read that section of code? So there's also some cleanup just in the process.
It's got this weird sentence that says it's not, it says you can't have a driveway wider than 14 feet, but it says then in the next sentence, it shall not be interpreted that this shall prohibit circular driveways or other patterns which are designed to provide access to private garages or doorways. It's a strange thing. It sounds old. I don't know where that came from. And it's just not enforced. I remember when I asked Mr. Boyle, previous zoning administrator, about it, he essentially said that he read it, that anyone who wanted, you could have as big a garage as you can fit on your house, and he would approve any driveway because it's serving that garage. So it's kind of what's the point of that? It just seemed like a strange thing that we should decide. I would just add it to the other list. We don't have to get into it tonight, but it was one thing that I think needs to be looked at because it just hasn't been, it's either been interpreted differently by different people and or not evenly enforced, similar to the lot averaging thing, and obviously we have a new zoning administrator now, and I think things are already being run probably better with, with a fresh set of eyes, looking at stuff now and trying to be more consistent. But that was just one thing that wasn't on the list that I would just add to that future, take a look at this list.
Yeah, I'll sort of make my plug here first in the importance of keeping a zoning ordinance up to date, right? So I know we spend a lot of time every year looking at the city budget, right? It's controlling about $100 million worth of money, whether it's operating or capital, and the zoning ordinance may well be controlling at least half of that and sort of more in years when you have big private projects coming through. So these ordinances that govern how sort of investment happens in the city are important. And so having a regular program of things, things on the list to be updated, what's important to focus on right now versus maybe what's something we can hold till later.
Right.
But I think that is something we're getting to with, one, a new zoning administrator, and two, a proper staff for the zoning shop. So
Right.
now we have a zoning inspector, we have a property maintenance officer.
And I like the idea, sorry to interrupt you, Paul, but I'm thinking out loud. I like the idea of having like that attachment for future things to look at, that we can keep a running list. I'm remembering now, remember the big dust up with the parking at the taco place? And there was this weird stuff in the code about like, you cannot use the street to store cars, or I don't know, all kinds of, was that weird, remember that weird language? We all got kind of, we read it and we were like, what is this? And how's this being applied? That's another example of like something that has weird language. It's not really evenly applied. I don't know where it came from, probably from many decades ago. So the idea of keeping a running list of just concerns or just questions or things that we might want to look at in the future, I think is an excellent idea, because like that way, you can't do it all at once, but if you have a running list, periodically people can look at it and go through it and say, oh yeah, it's time we maybe elevate that up, So, we could probably look through it and come up with many other things too, but those are, it's like two examples that just stood out to me that aren't on the list that was attached, and we should, consider adding those.
The comment from Mr. Gresko at our last meeting, public comment, that will be addressed at a future change that you're going to address?
Yes, there were sort of a couple comments that were made in different forums. One was about allowing for staff to administratively approve what today is a variance that has to be requested to the BZA, and that is when you have a non-conforming housing footprint, meaning it extends into a required yard, side yard, front yard, whatever, and someone comes in and wants to build a second story on top of that. That's something that staff has flagged as something that would be beneficial, one, from sort of an ease of the homeowner trying to permit their project, but also in terms of encouraging people to reuse the structures they have. Usually the greenest building you have is the one that's already built. There's obviously a lot of embedded carbon in it, but also there's mature soil that comes along with any lot, mature trees, and so if you make it hard to do second-story additions, really what you're steering people to is to tear down the existing structure so that they can meet a lot line requirement. When instead, maybe the greener approach would actually just to make it easy to make it easy to do the thing you want, hold on to the trees, hold on to the soil, and put the second story on the existing structure. But
great,
that's for future.
Good. Okay. So are we all set for that item? Great. So I think we're into. Does anybody have a planning commissioner report?
I had one.
Just quick, because we're going to.
I know. I just had one on line 351. There's some text that's in strikeout. I think the words "shall be measured" maybe shouldn't be struck, just in the actual text amendments. Am I reading that correctly? The minimum front yard depths. Do we want to keep the words "shall be measured" from the existing street right of way? Because they're in strike through right now.
I think you're right.
Yes, otherwise you're missing a verb.
Yeah, that's all from me. And I also support the staff's recommendation of not allowing parking lots as a principal use in the official design district. So thank you for preemptively including that.
All right. Any planning commissioners' reports? Seeing none, I think, Mr. Stoddard, it's your turn with the director's report.
And I will be brief. We've got 10 minutes if we don't want to extend here. So a few things were prepared in your report that was sent out earlier. 2 quarterly reports, one from building safety, the other from planning and zoning. As always, these are reports that we produce on a quarterly basis to keep you updated on where we are on our budget expenditures, personnel highlights, major projects that are moving through the process, but also so that you all can track and there is some oversight of the work that's going on in all of the shops within CPEDS. And I know a zoning quarterly report is also in the works. The commercial and retail report, for those that didn't get a chance to see it, is recorded. We do have the link in the report. On October 16th, 2023, Lisa Benjamin was on with City Council to provide what I thought was really a compelling report on the status of retail and commercial in the city. And the report really highlighted a lot of the city's strengths in terms of its balance of uses, whether that's office and between office and retail. And some notable takeaways here: low vacancy rates, especially in there they're already low, and then they're low in comparison to what's going on in the rest of the region. Retail vacancy, I know that's commonly a concern. People see a vacant storefront, but across the entire city, retail vacancy is at 3.5%, which is sort of unusually low. That might actually be a sign that you'd actually don't have enough retail for new shops to move in and stand up. And then office vacancy is low at 6.2%. Included in the report were some ideas for that property owners might use to reinvest and renovate some of their existing shopping centers. And then something else that was included in the report was, and this is often a question that comes up when there's a development proposal, what is the right ground floor use, or what ground floor uses would contribute to the community, whether immediately or in the larger picture. And there was a list of uses, and I'll sort of make a plug here going back to the zoning program. Many of those beneficial uses, and I'll call out daycare as an example, is currently prohibited in the B2 zoning district. But if you look at the Amazon's HQ2 project in National Landing, that's actually one of the things they included in the ground floor of their new office headquarters was a daycare. And so can you have and really a lot of that is sort of modernizing the idea of an office district. It's not the 1960s district where all the men commute in and they go to their jobs and then they commute home. That it's really sort of a place where everyone belongs and there are services for everyone. So that was a great report. Just wanted to point people to it. There was a late ad, and I apologize for this getting into your packet late. There's a memo, so no action tonight, but scheduled for action at your next meeting. The Housing Commission has a call out for representatives to two working groups they've got. The Affordable Living Policy Work Group as well as the Affordable Housing Fund Work Group. The second one I mentioned, the Fund Work Group, will have one meeting in November, and that's to provide direction on appropriate use of affordable housing funds. And then the first one I mentioned, the Living Policy Work Group. This is a group that meets every so often, every couple of years. Here it mentions 5 years to review and revise the city's affordable living policy. So that'll be an ongoing commitment as detailed in the memo. Happy to take any questions you all have tonight. I can answer them if I can. Otherwise, I'll take them back to the staff liaison to the Housing Commission. And the request would that you all be ready to make appointments to these two groups in your next meeting.
Looks like we're good till next meeting.
All right. And then if I could, I'll just go through the look ahead very briefly. Mr. Trainer, if you have the agenda available. I think your next meeting is easier than tonight's meeting. Ooh, can you? Oh, I got it back here. So your next meeting is a little easier than this one. You've got a public hearing and recommendation back to council on the zoning cleanups that you saw tonight. A first work session to look at the park plan for Fellows property. You had seen the text document, the master plan with the conceptual ideas. This will come back to you in sort of the pre-site plan stages. The project team wants to get your review and input before they go out and engineer a site plan. You'll also get your first work session on the bike plan update that's making the rounds in November, and that'll be looking at a level of stress analysis for city biking, as well as an identification of maybe what are the 10 to 12 biggest sort of priority needs, whether those are spot fixes or routes that need to be developed, and staff will be asking for your input, one, to make sure we got the level of stress analysis right, and then two, of those priorities, which ones do you think are most important? That's also making the rounds with the CACT, obviously, as well as the ESC, and then the EDA, who has long been a funding partner for bike infrastructure in the city. And we also have 2 community meetings scheduled. I don't have the exact dates on hand, but we'll do a more traditional style community meeting as well as a tent at the farmers market. And we'll go out to the public again sort of a few months after that, but this is really the first one to make sure we're pointed in the right direction. And then lastly, we'll be distributing our community service survey. December 6th, we're looking at a joint work session with Housing Commission, and that is to review the demographic projections that we're working on. And since we will be joint, the Brendan Woodley, the liaison to the Housing Commission has also offered he could provide an update on what's going on with Virginia Village, as well as the Affordable Home Ownership Program. I think that also might be a good meeting if we can schedule it to get the speaker series in with the Charlottesville Planning Commission chair, so that we can really have a real focused discussion on housing items that night. That concludes my report.
And thank you for that report. Okay, any final words for the good of the cause? Seeing none, I think we are ready to adjourn. There's more.